Birthday, Councilor Lube. Wasn't it yesterday?
It was. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I haven't brought you pie because I got a cold right after my birthday and I didn't want to expose you and the fam. So we'll
yeah,
do pie.
I was actually thinking about it. I was like, it's almost, we need to figure out when we can do pie.
Right.
The community should know Councilor Newton and I celebrate our birthdays in February with pie. It's tradition. Delicious Banning's pie, actually. That's where we go.
Yep.
Mr. Nolop, we got still 2 minutes, correct? You'll let me know when we're ready? Okay, thank you.
Everybody looks so serious.
I'm just double checking that agreement that we got this afternoon. It looks like it's the same as the one that was in the packet. So I'm just checking.
I'll be able to explain why they resent it.
Well, Councilor Shaw, Jesse had 2 items that weren't initially with the packet, and perhaps this was one of them. When you first got your packet, was it attached?
It was attached.
Okay, well, I'm not sure why it's stamped supplemental, but it was.
Carol, maybe we can just ask Sean. It looks to me like it's the same, unless it's a really minor change, and maybe they were just trying to make sure we saw it. So we can ask Sean if there's a difference.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Are we talking about the reach agreement?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, the second one is a minorly revised version of the first one.
Okay.
What's the revision, Sean, so they can look at it?
Shelby there?
Oh, is it like a typo or something?
No, it's just a slight refinement. I'd have to pull up my email to tell you that if Shelby's not there.
We can do it during the meeting with
Okay.
the city attorney. Sorry, I thought you kind of knew off the top of your head.
Yeah, it has to do with the order of who's getting paid. So there was the previous agreement says that the city will pay to reach. This one it's that section, and we can find it for the presentation, but it's a super minor change.
Thank you. All right, I will call this Tigard City Council and Town Center Development Agency meeting to order. City Recorder, please call roll.
Councilor Newton,
Here.
Council President Lube,
Here.
Councilor Shaw,
Here.
Mayor Snyder,
Here.
Youth Councilor Nog,
Here.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Here. All right, Mr. Nolop, would you mind putting a flag up on the screen? I'd ask everyone to participate in a Pledge of Allegiance while muted on their own. All right, thank you, Mr. Nolop. And Councilor Staff, any non-agenda items? I know City Manager Reimer, you were going to briefly mention, or I'm going to mention that we added a proclamation for recognizing March 7th as COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day. Is that the only thing you had?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Councilors. That's the only thing from our end. Thank you.
All right, and that's going to be considered on the agenda under Proclamations and Recognition in Section 3. So we'll move on to public comment. Anyone that wishes to make public comment can do so by calling in to 503-966-4101. And those with general comments should call in now to get into the queue. Assistant City Manager Nyland, do you have any follow-up to previous public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Yes, we did not receive any written public comment at our February 15th council meeting. We did have a caller who discussed some issues around rats and chickens, and our team is in contact and working with this constituent. And I believe there are plans to examine our urban livestock code. Now on to the fun fact. So Tuesday, today, it's all about the twos. The date 2022 is both a palindrome and an ambigram. The date reads, at least in Europe, 22-0-22-0-22, and it reads the same from left to right, right to left, and upside down. So February 22nd observes Be Humble Day and Cook a Sweet Potato Day. So some interest, thank you, I got the props. So some interesting things to note about today. On this day in 1935, planes were banned from passing over the White House, but it wasn't due to a safety concern. President Franklin D. Roosevelt banned air traffic crossing the White House so he could get a good night's sleep. In 1956, Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel debuted on the music charts, and it's known as his first hit song. And in 1997, the first clone animal from an adult animal cell was announced, and that animal is known as Dolly the sheep. And I start to feel old with these fun facts because it feels like yesterday was Dolly the sheep. And I'm like, oh my God, that was 25 years ago. So that is my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw? You are muted still.
How about that? I'm having,
You're good now.
thank you. And I just wanted to mention to Assistant Cindy Nyland that I believe it's also National Margarita Day for those who might be following that. Just saying.
I couldn't, this is my prop.
Good point. Point taken. Excellent prop.
All right. Thank you. And let's see. City Recorder Krager, I don't think we had any written public comment by the deadline. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And we'll move on to phone-in public comment. Mr. Nolip, are there any callers in the queue?
Mr. Mayor, no callers at this time.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to proclamations and recognition. And I would ask the council to consider proclaiming March 7th as COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day. This suggestion and request came in from an organization. I know the U.S. Conference of Mayors is also supporting this, and I think it's an important thing to recognize in our community. And so I would ask the council's consideration in approving this proclamation. Is there a motion for approval? Council President Lube?
Sorry, I can hear chaos in my house and my child doing something upstairs. It's distracting. Is there a motion for, I move to approve proclaiming March 7th as COVID-19 Victims and Survivors Memorial Day.
And I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, please, starting with Youth Councillor Nog for an advisory vote.
Youth Councillor Nog,
Yes.
Councillor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councillor Goodhouse.
Yes.
All right, and that motion is adopted unanimously, and thank you, council, for acting on that. City Manager Reimer and leadership team, I would ask that we push that in our social media channels and other communication avenues, please. Let's see, we now need to convene as the Town Center development agency for the next agenda. So with that, we will move on to consideration of a development assistance agreement with Reach CDC. Mr. Fairley, you have a presentation and staff report?
I do, Chair Snyder. Good evening, Chair Snyder and the board of the Town Center Development Agency. My name is Sean Farley, Redevelopment Project Manager. And we're here requesting the board's consideration tonight of a resolution that will help fulfill one of the priorities of a new Tiger Triangle, planning for equitable development. And that is the providing funds for construction of much needed affordable housing. This resolution would authorize the executive director of the TCDA to sign a development assistance agreement with Reach CDC. The agreement would set the terms for $1 million in tax increment financing funding of the 85 unit Dartmouth North project. And this funding would go pay certain systems development charges that the project is due. The $1 million was recommended unanimously for approval by the Town Center Advisory Commission at their December meeting. And before I turn it over to a representative of Reach, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of previous discussions. We did have a recent positive meeting with Reach regarding looking into a partnership to build out some much needed pedestrian connections that would connect this future development to the shopping area of the Triangle. So that's very promising. We'll bring back the details of that discussion as it becomes more final. And then also we wanted to report that in response to previous discussion that staff is working on a survey that'll go out to the current residents of the Triangle and get their opinions and their needs for transportation in the Triangle. So asking their opinions on different issues and their, basically how do they get around now and how do they want to get around in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex Salaman from Reach, and he's got about an 8-minute PowerPoint, and then we'll have time at the end for any questions that may come up. So take it away, Alex.
Hey, everyone. I am going to start sharing.
And welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a hard act to follow with all that stuff that happened on February 22nd. Yeah, like Sean said, my name is William Alexander Alaman. I'm a housing development project manager here at Reach CDC, and I am excited to present Dartmouth Crossing Phase 1. Really quickly, I wanted to highlight Dartmouth Crossing. Here at Reach, we see it as a two-phase project. It is located along Southwest Clinton Street and between Southwest 69th and 68th Avenue. Phase 1 will be a residential 85-unit affordable housing complex. And Phase 2, we are working on developing. We did a feasibility analysis with the City of Tigard. We got community engagement on the best use for the site. Currently, the desired uses that came out of the study were a market hall, office, childcare facility, and a community center. So we've been reaching out to partners so that we can hopefully make that development come to life as well. We will be focusing on Phase 1, this upper portion, for today's presentation. Here is a zoomed out view of the development. It's here in yellow. This slide is to highlight just the proximity to everything. Here's I-5, and Dartmouth goes to the I-5 as an entry and exit. We are very excited for the MAX Southwest Corridor line to come in on 72nd Street. Dartmouth is also in walking distance to the Winco and all the other grocery stores, and conveniently located to the community college and the city center. So we're really excited for this project. It's very well located, and we're hoping that it provides a really good atmosphere for the residents. For this presentation, I wanted to highlight the TIF programmatic criteria, and in the following slides, I'll go through how we meet each of these, how the project improves multimodal transportation, provides equitable economic participation, mitigates environmental and stormwater issues, provides high-quality pedestrian-friendly urban design, provides public amenities, and placemaking and local identity. To start off, we'll go through the equitable economic participation. Here at REACH, we strive to lead with equity, and our project aims to exceed the 30% DMWESB participation. If any of you are familiar, it's minority, women, and emerging small businesses. For this project and all of REACH's projects, we assemble a project advisory committee comprised of local organizations that provide insight into resident needs and project design elements. I have a few slides that are specifically highlighting what the project advisory committee has incited us into the development and design for the project. As I mentioned in the slide before, we have locational advantages, and many of them include high opportunity retail and living wage jobs within a 10-mile radius. And lastly, bringing forth community economic development efforts in phase 2 will provide a comprehensive, affordable community with amenities like a recreational community center, international public market hall, affordable childcare, and affordable office space. In this side, I wanted to give an overlay of the site and how it will be situated on the plot of land. Here are the units. Here's the parking area that leads down and into the Clinton Street. This is 68th, and to Clinton and 69th with street parking as well. On every floor, we will have bike storage. We're also hoping to partner with Fourth Mobility to bring a vehicle that residents can sign up for and utilize, kind of like a rent and share. As I mentioned, we're walking distance to the bus line and future Max line, and conveniently located to the grocery store, city center, community college, and jobs. Addressing the environmental and stormwater issues, all of our planters will be stormwater runoff areas, meaning that all the water coming off the roof, our plaza, and any concreted area will flow into these green spaces. This allows for low impact development. A lot of pollutants can get into our storm drains just from running off and going straight into the gutter. So we are preventing that by having the water sloped towards these planters and allowing it to slowly filtrate through the soils and back into the system. This view also allows us to see the community room, the public plaza, and then the upper plaza, which provides a small gathering area for our residents. Here we can see the public plaza and how it seamlessly joins the sidewalk. A closer view of how the areas are sloped into these planters, seating for public use. I'll have a better photo of our entryway and then this upper gathering space. We're heading this way. And here, one of the things that our project advisory committee really wanted was small gathering spaces where the residents can meet one another, or they can hang out and invite their friends over. So this upper plaza serves as a place where residents can gather, hang out, have a small event. And then in this glass space is this area where another thing that they asked for was like a public or a sharing library and a space for them to just relax that's outside of their unit. And this way they can hang out here, not have to always stay in their apartment, and have space in case they would like to be a part of the community. Moving back down the the little public area up here, we have our entryway. And this really indicates the urban design that we're trying to strive for. We have public gathering spaces, small benches, and up here for our residents, we have a small nook where people can come out and really see the streetscape and provide this seamless interaction between the building and this walk area. On this side is our community area. The community room will go straight into the plaza. We've provided a kitchenette and a small seating area. This space will be used by our resident services and our community partners. They can host events on the plaza and then have access to these amenities while they're conducting their events or workshops. Looking from the corner view of 69th and Clinton, we're going to start heading this way to the building. You can see the community room and how it seamlessly enters the plaza, but also goes back into the courtyard that I'll talk about in a little bit. Coming this direction, we have our private townhouses. So these townhouses will be rented out and it provides private access to the streetscape. This is something we also heard from our project advisory committee, that sometimes the residents would like to have space to just come out into the streetscape instead of having to go through all the corridors. We also provided our stormwater planters so that all the water coming off the building and off the sidewalks can come into these planters, but also provides a small privacy to the entrance of their units. Walking down the street, we have our placemaking mural. This mural, we're hoping to really make it a piece that indicates that they are at Dartmouth. We're going to be working with local artists to fill this space. This is just a placemaker, but we're really excited for this piece. We've been in contact with a couple artists already and are really hoping that this creates a feel of the area where you can be walking down the street and really know where you are based on this mural and how it interacts with the building. Here's our breezeway. We also wanted to provide a space that was covered, and this way, you know, we were thinking about putting some benches in this area, and that way they can have a covered space to gather, hang out, possibly do a small event or put tables for lunches. Walking through the breezeway, we enter into the courtyard. This courtyard again shows how we are really scaping our landscaping with these stormwater planters, so all water coming off comes in. And here highlighting that we will be using all native species, creating a sense of space and place to identify with the local environment. This area will also serve doubly as a playground. We have not decided yet. We're hoping that our project advisory committee can really help indicate how we want this public space to be, but that's coming in future meetings. Here, again, one of the main items that we heard from our project advisory committee was that families really wanted a space where they could do their laundry and watch their kids. And so this interior courtyard serves as a space where families can come, do their laundry on the first floor, watch their kids, and possibly, you know, use this as a flex space to do their homework or hang out, while also doubling on the weekends or in the afternoons to be a workshop space for our resident services and our community partners. This is my final slide, and I just wanted to highlight how we are doing phase one with the residential, and we are looking forward to and working with our partners to really start to develop phase two, which will include the market hall, childcare facility, community center, and office space that is much needed in the Tiger Triangle. At this time, I'm open to questions and will stop my screen share.
Alex, thank you for that very robust presentation. Appreciate it. And I know that the council had some questions about the agreement. City Attorney Rahala, can you clarify that before we get into any other questions or comments?
Council, I can. So at the last minute, we were waiting for some changes from Reach's attorney. The previous version that you had in your council packet in section 3.1, the previous version said that TCDA shall pay to the city the assistance. That was changed because Reach needs it for their financing purposes. It needs to be paid directly to Reach. So, but we also wanted to cut down on the administrative confusion because this is basically being paid from TCDA to the city. So we clarified that for administrative convenience, the payment is made directly to the city, but it is treated as a payment to Reach. That was the only change.
And I can highlight why. With our low income tax credits, we have something called eligible basis. And all money coming in and through the project just needs to state that it comes to Reach, even though it's strictly going directly to the city. It is a way for us to navigate the funds and show to our auditors that money came into the project and paid the system development charges. So all that to say, it is a way for us at the end of the project to show our lenders and our auditors that money, yes, did come from the city of Tigard and was then paid out.
Thank you. All right, council, questions or deliberation? Youth Councilor Nog.
I really appreciated the slideshow as well as the added emphasis on planting native plants, because I think that is a great educational opportunity for any youth and just kind of fostering that environmentally focused plan. One of my questions was if there was going to be any electric vehicle charging places in the parking lot. Has that been in consideration yet?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple things I didn't mention is Reach provides solar on all their buildings. Per our funding, we have to make an EV ready station. So there will be an electric car. We're hoping that our partnership with Force Mobility will be that electric car that folks can rent. And we will be striving for Earth Advantage Gold, which is a sustainability standard for our buildings.
Councilor Shaw.
Great, thank you very much. And Alex, just for the record, I actually work for Fourth, and so perhaps a question to Attorney Rahala. I don't think there's a conflict because it's a very small portion of the overall project, having a charging station, but just wanted to state that that overall scope. But I will, to City Attorney Rahala, if you think I should recuse myself, I'm happy to do so.
No, Councilor Shaw, so long as you are not receiving a direct financial benefit as a result of the action, you're allowed to participate and vote.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And no, I'm not, for the record. So definitely an exciting project. And thank you so much, Alex, for your presentation. Perhaps just a couple of questions. One is the local artist from Tigard, and maybe that's a little too local. The second would be, is the community center going to be open to other community members of Tigard? And then the third, with regards to the pedestrian sidewalks and walkways, I know Project Manager Farley had mentioned that that was going to be a consideration, but if you could speak just a little bit more about how that is going to be considered, that'd be terrific, and look forward to your answers.
Yeah, absolutely. To answer the last one first, we have been in communication with Sean, really trying to identify where the street, how the residents would navigate the local community. And so trying to identify which streets need it most, and then trying to identify where crosswalks would be most beneficial. This is all in the works. I think one of the things I've been advising is to do a parking study and also a walkability study in the area. I know that people will want to get to the Winco. So how do we navigate the streets to get there, and how do we build those sidewalks out? Your second question about how the community room would be used. we are partnering with a lot of local organizations, to name a few: the Latino Network, African Youth Community Organizing, Community Vision, who will be sponsoring some of the residents, the Somali Empowerment Circle, Muslim Education Trust, and that's just to name a few. So we're really partnering with all of our partners we usually do on developments. They will have access to our community room. Really, it's just a sign-up sheet, and they allot the time. And our property managers are very well trained to work with these folks. Granted, the time slots are limited. It's not 24-hour access. It would be during working hours or during working weekend hours. So I don't want to make it sound like everyone all the time, but it will be a dedicated space for folks coming in. They do a lot of workforce training. They do a lot of educational training. And so we are actually really excited for that part. To answer your first question about the local artists, we have been getting recommendations actually from the community college, and we've worked with them on quite a few projects, the PCC in general, and so we're hoping to, yes, get artists from Tigard specifically, but that will be up to the project advisory committee. Everything we do is usually through that committee, and representatives from all those organizations that I named have a representative on our PAC. And so we'll take a vote, we'll see which one comes to light, and I'd be happy to share that with Sean when the time comes.
All right, Councilor Goodhouse and then Council President Liu.
Thank you. A couple questions or a handful of questions. How reliant is the project on Max? Because it sounded like in the presentation it was pretty reliant, but that's still a wild card if that would even, the light rail will come through. Is there any parking, or how much parking is there, just offhand? And if this isn't, if for some reason this doesn't go through as far as this funding, is there other funding, or how reliant is this project on the funding from the city?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen to showcase the parking. So in the case of the parking, we only have these 4 stalls for the parking lot. All around the building will be parking stalls. One of our community partners is Community Vision. They help folks with disabilities, and so I want to say that all of our units will be accessible, and we will be looking to house a lot of folks with disabilities. As far as our reliance on the Max line, we are a block away from Dartmouth and very close to public transit, so it is not completely reliant on the Max line. I agree with you. I do not know how that project will come to light or when. So we are actually working. That's one of the reasons we look towards fourth mobility, so that our residents would have access to a vehicle in this area. And so overall, very transit oriented, and we're excited to provide a lot of bike storage in case of the need arise as well. And as far as funding reliance, we are relying on this funding. I don't know if you guys have been following the interest rate spikes, but interest rates are going up. That heavily impacts our project financing. We are also needing this financing to cover our system development costs. That's the main reason for this funding and where it will be allocated towards. And so all that to say, we were so thankful for our first approval from the other committee, and are very excited to work with you guys because we do need this funding to make this affordable housing a reality.
And one last follow-up question. Since this is phase 1, is there going to be additional funding that's going to be needed in the future from the city as well?
So the future funding, we are working with Sean on identifying the offsite improvements. And so that would, I don't actually know what vehicle or how that funding would come, but we are looking to partner with the city for the offsite improvements. And that would be the sidewalks, the crosswalks along Clinton, and so that is not directly from the project, but we are happy to participate in that.
I guess I have to rephrase what I meant is when you, this is phase 1 for build out, but when you do phase 2 and 3 for the community center, those parts where you need additional funds for SDCs or items for that as well?
For phase 2, it is early to say, only because of what the developments will actually be. If we do a market hall and a community center, that would be a no. And so I don't want to commit to anything yet. We have some really high hopes for this second phase, but it depends on the uses that we are able to put together.
Thank you.
I think it's Council President Lube and then Councilor Newton.
Yeah, most of my questions have been answered, and so I just want to make some comments. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that has gone into the building as far as making it as comfortable and livable as possible, including the laundry space, but you can see your family, you know, your kids doing what they need to do, and the mix of apartments, especially the 2 and 3 bedrooms, which allow families to comfortably live together, especially if, you know, all of them are going to be accessible. So I think all of those are really important to ensure people are living in comfortable, nice spaces, you know, that you want to call your home. And I also want to make the comment that, you know, talking to businesses in the area, they're actually really excited for housing to go in and development to go in. And I think phase 2 is going to be really exciting and really be able to launch the area and to be more of a gathering space, you know, and things to do in that area of the triangle. So all very exciting things, and thank you for your thoughtfulness.
Councilor Newton.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Most of my questions have been answered as well, and I would echo the comments that Council President Lube made. It's really an exciting project, and I would just like to say publicly, I'm on the Community Development Block Grant Policy Advisory Board, and this project was presented there, and the raters were very impressed with this project. So I commend you for just everything that you put into it. It's going to be just an amazing place for folks to live and call home. And so, again, I just wanted to publicly commend the project because it was very well received by that group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Goodhouse, is that your original hand or do you have more questions?
Original hand.
Okay. Is there any further comment or questions or a motion? Councilor Shaw.
Thank you. And again, excellent presentation. And just want to mention that the vehicle that we placed there is an electric vehicle, and it's part of a car share program that I believe also, Alex, is partially funded by the United States Department of Energy. And so it is a subsidized cost as well. So just want to mention that. And then the second is just noting some concern about the pedestrian and the sidewalk and use case, and making sure that we include that in the future. And it sounds like funding may be in question. So perhaps just want to note that we need to ensure that that is something that becomes funded and not set aside for multiple years later. Thank you.
On that note, I will also make the comment that Alex, given the feedback or the information you're providing about who some of the target residents may be and their relative mobility challenges, even pedestrian walking, that's a very steep area, let's put it that way. So it may be more than just having a sidewalk. And I think that's important to be considered in the overall picture here. Councilor Goodhouse?
I don't know if we were going to jump to voting or not. I was just going to say that and I voiced some of these, but some of my big concerns with this is just doing some of these things backwards in the triangle. The project's great, I'm all for it, but not having the proper accessibility, sidewalks, a lot of unknowns in there, and building something like this with too many unknowns of how to get to transit, how to get around activity, it just seems wrong to me to do it backwards. And so almost we have, as the area grows, there's gonna be more money there, but seems like we need to do more of these things before we start talking about doing or moving forward on a project. I hate to always gonna have a project that's relying on getting around, mobility, transit, access, but then now that's in place, and then it opens up and there's nowhere to get in there. So there's too many unknowns for me right now still on this project.
Well, part of the development will help provide some of that infrastructure, not all of it, but that's partly how you get that network built out, is through development happening. I know that's more piecemeal than we probably all want, but I don't know of an alternative funding strategy for that. But I appreciate the comment, Councilor Goodhouse. Does someone want to make a motion? And Councilor Goodhouse, I don't know if that was an indication that you plan to vote no, but I guess if you are, I'd at least want to hear a little more about that. That was the first sense I got there.
Do you want me to jump in, or I saw Council President Lube put her hand up?
I think she was going to make a motion, but I think, yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to have the discussion now, please feel free.
Okay. Yeah, my concern is that to me, as money comes in, and I know we bonded against some of the future money, to me, it makes sense to start putting some of that infrastructure in place that will support these projects. We've done a couple of affordable housing projects as we do more, but it seems like we're doing more and using that money up, which is going to take longer to use to have money to build out the sidewalks or the accessibility, or as the mayor pointed out, to get around. I know it was mentioned, I think, one of the TCAC meetings, that it might not be for years or maybe not have enough money for sidewalks. And so I'm looking at something where we're building out an area, and the question is, do we have enough money for the sidewalks and to get people around and get them to transit and make it properly an active area? Or are we going to build something that's going to be like the rest of the city, where there's kind of sidewalks and nowhere, there's gaps, there's pockets, and it's not really something that's connected? To me, it seems more having a strategy in place of actually having everything connected properly, so when people do move in right away, they can access everything, as opposed to kind of being individual islands all over the triangle. And so that's my biggest concern, is that rather than jump forward on this and then look at something that's a great project, but it can't be fully engaged into the area, I'd rather wait and get some of that infrastructure put in place and then have a project like this go in.
I think you could make that comment about the whole city, but I understand the point. You didn't really answer my question though about, are you planning to vote no?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Mr. Fairley, you have a response or some information?
Yeah, just to respond to Councilor Goodhouse. So again, our meeting with Reach, we've had one meeting and an internal meeting, and we have identified a section of Clinton that won't be that would be unfinished, and when Reach is doing their required street improvements for this project, the idea is that we would have an agreement that they would build out that sidewalk connection. So there would be a continuous sidewalk from the new development to the Winco shopping area. So
that sounds creative, as a creative way to solve a problem.
Yeah, we think so. We need to get all the details down and figure it out. But there is TIF funding available that could build that sidewalk at a much more efficient way and lower price than to bring in just a separate contractor to build it. While their contractors are out there building their required street improvement, they could build this sidewalk connection.
All right. Thank you, Council President Lube.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to respond to Councilor Goodhouse, and I understand and appreciate the sentiment, but I worry that the path you're going down is perfection being the enemy of the good and the move for progress and in the right direction. We have so many people who don't have enough homes and enough places to stay in the area. I can't imagine holding up a really cool project like this that's going to provide a lot of homes for a lot of people who need them, because we don't feel like we have enough sidewalks. But I certainly understand we want to ensure that there's a way to get around and to transit and all of these different situations. But, we can't wait for the grid to be perfect. As development comes in, maybe they don't like the sidewalks that we put in, or all of these different things. And then all of the money that we spent to put in these sidewalks and these connections actually get torn up and redeveloped. And so, while I understand the sentiment, I can't imagine voting no on a project like this because there isn't, one sidewalk, or looking at the triangle in general and saying it's not developed enough versus this specific project, and what the potential is. So I'm just trying to have some conversation and some understanding around it.
I guess
Councilor
rather raise my hand. I don't know if this is also something that needs to be decided on right now. If we could get a little bit more, if this is something that could come back to council, we have a little bit more of an understanding of if we have those sidewalks, if we can get some of this more of a plan laid out and an agreement. And part of this, I don't always like to move forward with maybe an unknown of maybe some ideas. I don't know if this is time sensitive, or if it's something that we could spend a couple weeks on with Sean and get more of an agreement and have a little bit more of an idea of how we're gonna have that transportation around the area, or have it so people have access to get around.
Council President Lube, did you want to respond to that or make a motion?
Well, I was just going to say I'm not willing to continue to wait a couple of weeks. I think this is something where it's, there's been robust discussion. We're planning forward. We're planning for sidewalks and trying to figure out a way, and we need to move forward. So with that, I move to approve TCDA resolution number 22-01.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion on the actual motion now? All right, City Recorder, please read the number and title of the resolution.
Town Center Development Agency Resolution 22-01. A resolution authorizing the Executive Director of the Town Center Development Agency to sign a development assistance agreement with Reach Community Development to construct the Dartmouth Crossing North project. Director Newton.
Go ahead.
Director Newton.
Yes.
Director Lube.
Yes.
Councilor Shaw. Director Shaw.
Yes.
Chair Snyder.
Yes.
Director Goodhouse.
No, and for the reasons I mentioned earlier.
All right, so TCDA resolution 22-01 is going to be adopted 4-1. Thank you, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which will be reconvening as the Tigard City Council. And Alex, thank you and Sean, thank you for your work tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
And let's move on to a legislative public hearing, considering an ordinance amending the Tigard Municipal Code, Chapter 7.52, to prohibit fires in parks. And I need to open the public hearing, which I will do. And let's see, hearing procedures. Anyone that wishes to testify will be allowed to give testimony by phone and may call to get in the queue now. Phone number to call is 503-966-4101. And Mr. Gruen, staff report.
Yeah, thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. And before I go into my presentation, I do want to disclose that I am a February birthday and hope I can get in on the birthday pie club as both an eater of pie and maker of pies. So anyway, thank you. Good evening again, Rick Gruen. I'm the manager of City Parks, Recreation, and Green Infrastructure. Tonight, we're here to present an ordinance to amend Tigard Municipal Code 7.52 to prohibit fires in the parks. A little bit of background. This issue surfaced a number of weeks ago at a Council Goal 1 meeting, and we recognized that there is a gap in our code, and this gap also reminds us that the safety and security issue affects a number of council goals. Council Goal 1 and our houselessness response, goal 3, climate resiliency, and goal 4, park and trail safety. Currently, the city code is silent regarding the use of or the building of fires within city park property, which also includes our natural areas and open spaces. Considering the dryness of the last several summers and the continued challenges associated with camping activities in parks and open spaces, there is an increasing concern and risk of wildfire resulting from open camp or warming fires. The proposed ordinance would prohibit fires within all city park properties, including our natural areas, sensitive areas, and open spaces. The exception being fires would be restricted to designated areas of our city-owned park facilities, our barbecue grills, and our picnic shelters. So a very short presentation, Council. I'm open to answering any questions that you might have.
So at this point, we should limit any questions, or we should limit our comments and questions to just questions on the presentation before we get to testimony. So anybody have questions? All right, I'm going to move us on to public testimony. City Recorder Krager, did we have any written testimony?
We did not.
Mr. Nullup, are there any callers in the queue?
Mr. Mayor, no callers at this time.
All right, Mr. Gruen, no response to testimony, I take it?
No.
All right, I will close the public hearing and council consideration of ordinance number 22-03. Anybody have questions, comments, or want to make a motion? Councillor Shaw.
Happy to make a motion if there's no discussion. And if not, I move to approve ordinance number 22-03.
I'll second the motion, and then it looks like Youth Councillor Nog had a question.
Youth Councillor Nog, go ahead.
I had a really quick question. Would the fire thing include like no fireworks in the park?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, there's a motion and a second, and I don't see any other questions or discussion. So City Recorder, will you please read the number and title of the resolution? Councillor Goodhouse?
Can I, sorry, I just popped in my head when after Youth Councillor Nog asked that. What about, I know that in Cook Park, they allow people to barbecue with briquettes. Is that going to be still allowed or not allowed?
Councillor Goodhouse, yes. There's some exceptions. As we get into, severe fire danger, we could restrict that. But currently, the authorized use would allow for barbecue briquettes. If we got to a point where we were in high fire danger, we could just put a temporary restriction on that or limit it to just propane barbecue grills. So no open flame ashes that could fly off and spark.
Thank you.
All right, City Recorder Krager, I think I'd asked you to read the number and title of the ordinance.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gruen, the ordinance says portable charcoal grills are not allowed. Is that correct?
Right. We were concerned about, right. So the city-owned fixed grills at the shelters would be allowed for barbecue.
And you could put charcoal briquettes in there, but you couldn't use a portable charcoal grill, correct?
Correct.
Isn't that what it says? Great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And I
Yes,
think that
Councilor
makes sense. Thank you.
Are you ready for the ordinance reading?
Yes, please.
Ordinance number 22-03, an ordinance amending Tigard Municipal Code, Chapter 7.52 to prohibit fires in parks.
And a roll call vote, starting with Youth Councilor Nog for an advisory vote.
Youth Councilor Nog,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes.
All right. Ordinance number 22-03 is adopted unanimously. Thank you, staff, for the work on that. And we will move on
Thank you,
to
Council.
an update from on Tigard Economic Development Program from Economic Development Manager Purdy. Item number 6 on the agenda.
Good evening, Council. It's good to see everybody. Mike is going to run the PowerPoint for me. I had a technical difficulty. My laptop died this morning, so I'm going to track everything but the PowerPoint. Mike, thank you for queuing that up. And please bear with me. I'm working off of a different laptop that I'm not used to, so some of the control functions are slightly different. So I have a lot of content to Lloyd Purdy, I'm the city's economic development manager. I have a lot of content to share with you with this first presentation. There is no specific council action for you to take tonight other than to discuss and advise and have a dialogue about the city's economic development program. And with that, there is a lot to go through. If it's your preference, I'll move through the whole presentation and we can come back if there's questions about specific themes or PowerPoint slides I share, if that's okay with everybody. Mayor, Council.
We can try it. We're not always great at that, but let's give it a try.
Understood. We'll try it. I'm flexible either way. Mike, we can go to the next slide. What I will be talking to everyone, all of you about tonight is the city's economic development strategy and our tactics and our programs. These align with the city's strategic vision and community promise. And in alignment with these North Stars, these lighthouses, we've created and launched a series of programs that focus on equity, entrepreneurism, and economic mobility. I think equity is a fairly well understood term these days. Entrepreneurism is in this context a focus on micro enterprise and small businesses. It may be as an entrepreneur of one, or it may be a small business owner who's started a business, but it's a focus on small business and hence entrepreneurism or micro enterprise. And then economic mobility might be a new term for us to talk about. Economic mobility looks at helping our Tigard residents improve their livelihoods, advance their careers, and build wealth. So those are the three pillars, I guess, of our economic development strategy. And this adds to our existing program, this new focus. The strategic plan supports this through eight different focus areas. I haven't listed all of them on this slide. I've listed for you probably the four most important uses, but the strategic vision does call us to build a local economy that is resilient, where the health of residents and the health of businesses increase together. It invites us to, it directs us to grow businesses that support and are supported by walkability, connectivity, and accessibility. It calls us to focus and build mixed-use development, inclusive of housing, shopping, employment, and service provision, while integrating transportation. And we'll talk more about that in this meeting and later in March with the Tigard Made project. The strategic vision invites us or asks us to ensure all businesses can connect to resources that help them grow and add value to the Tigard community. It reminds us we should focus on Tigard's business mix, which is a healthy mix of businesses, its central location in the region, and the city's access to talent to support a healthy economy with employment residence for everyone. It also encourages us to talk about and focus on blending of land uses, where commerce and employment can happen within and in proximity to neighborhoods. The last 2 points are in the strategic vision are to support a balanced, diverse mix of business sectors and employment opportunities. And then, of course, advance equitable economic opportunity. With that foundation, we can move through this presentation, and we can look at the third slide, which is a focus on the work we're doing through land use policy, business support programs, and finding ways to meet the needs of entrepreneurs, micro enterprise, larger businesses, and the Tigard workforce. And we're doing that through a lens of equity and focusing again on economic mobility for residents. The next slide that Mike will share with us starts to give all of us in this discussion a thorough grounding and a shared understanding of the Tigard economy. I have, I think, just 4 slides, maybe there's 5, that remind us what we're talking about when we talk about the city's economy. You all know we have 54,000 residents, a population that's been growing every year. Within the city, there's also 3,500 businesses. 2,500 of those are micro enterprise. That's small businesses, again, entrepreneurs with 10 employees or fewer. That is the lion's share of our economic activity. And of course, those businesses combined, the 3,500 businesses, employ 45,000 people. It's in an area of a landmass that covers about 20% of the city. And if we go to the next slide, Michael, we can look at the employment trends in the city. There are only 3,700, just under 3,700 people who wake up every morning in Tigard, go to work in Tigard, and then go back home to their house in Tigard. The rest of our residents that are in the workforce, that's about 24,000 people, head somewhere else in the region for their job, and over 40,000 people commute into the region every day for their job. So we are exporting our smart, capable residents to other communities and other jobs, and we are importing talent as well to power the companies in the city of Tigard. Mike, let's take a look at the next slide. This slide gives everyone a sense of a disaggregation of the economy. If we looked at different businesses by size, I mentioned that small micro enterprise is the lion's share of our firms, the large majority of firms. But this breaks down how many people those firms employ that are in that category, how many total payroll of those firms, average wages. There's a lot on this slide, and you don't necessarily need to understand it all right now, but I want you to know that we track this information every year. We update it. In fact, our economic development coordinator Dylan DeCabe Bemis is working on that right now, the annual update of this type of data that helps us understand the economy. Mike, we can go to the next slide. We also look at the economy in by different sectors. These are very broad sectors, right? Professional services and technical services, which are often people working in offices or, for instance, at Lincoln Tower. Then we have another sector, manufacturing and skilled trades. We often think about those businesses in our industrial lands. And then retail and consumer services. And those are the firms we often see most predominantly along 99W. The next slide that Mike will go to shows us not the businesses, but where the workforce is of those 40,000 people, or just over 40,000 people who are working and making their livelihood in Tigard. This helps us understand the types of firms for which they are employed. Sure, next slide. I'm just trying to keep up with my notes. This slide talks to us about the changes over the last 10 years and what we see growing and what we see not growing as much. And then the next slide, and the last of our data, is breaks up those same categories by the average annual wage of employees in those business sectors. And we see The high skilled and the semi-skilled professions on average have, of course, much higher wages than our retail economy. So that's a quick overview. Thanks, Mike, of a quick overview of our economy. You also are often interested in how we're connecting with businesses. And I will let you know that through the rest of the slides, all the people you see in these pictures are actually Tigard entrepreneurs. They're people we work with, they're people we talk to, they're people we're helping with our economic development programs. And in September, in September of 2021, with support from many other departments, we did a point-in-time check on the local economic conditions and local businesses. But beyond that one-time check-in, we do ongoing public involvement. That includes a monthly business-focused e-newsletter. Sometimes it comes out twice a month if there's relevant content to share. We invite new businesses to a monthly virtual now meet and greet, where we sit down, we being myself and Dylan Dickey-Bemis, our economic development coordinator. We sit down with any business that is new and wants to talk to us about being in business in Tigard. We send welcome packets to every new business that outline the programs and support we provide. And we're going to start this month doing a quarterly virtual open house for any business in the city that wants to check in with us. This is all on top of a bi-monthly business webinar we produce. We do this jointly with 4 other cities where we deliver content and talk to businesses in the area. So each of these businesses are an opportunity to talk to businesses and for businesses to share their challenges, successes, and experience with us. In addition to that, we've transitioned during COVID the bankers, brokers, and builders network into a one-on-one interview series that's helped inform the Tigard Made project that I'll mention a couple times. This is a good network and a source of information about what's coming in the future for businesses and development trends. And then, of course, you saw some data. I'm always looking into the crystal ball of the data, trying to get a handle on what's happening nationally, regionally, and locally. We also work with the Tigard Chamber and several other business support organizations. We have 13 other business support organizations we're constantly checking in with. And then a relatively new development, we gather and are part of a group of economic development managers and directors from all over the cities in Washington County who get together twice a month to compare best practices. This gives us a regional approach to economic development. So we can hit the next slide. For the rest of this presentation, I will talk to you about 3 broad categories of programs. The first is policy development, the economic development work we do that informs mostly you and the policy decisions you make. I'll talk about our economic foundations, the fundamental projects that help build a healthy economy. And then I'll talk to you about our equity-focused work. Staying on this slide for a moment, it's important to remind you that since our creation in 2013, the city's economic development program has managed a range of programs and projects. To this date, we've leveraged more than $14 million of outside non-city investment to help build economic resilience, improve economic mobility, and increase the prosperity of residents. You all know during COVID-19, we worked with economic development practitioners from all over the county to create an innovative business assistance program using community development financial institutions, CDFIs. The county-wide work was making sure we could gather some funds, some CARES funds from the county, but we led the way in working with CDFI partners like Craft 3 and Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon. And those names should be familiar to many of you by now, and I'll mention them a couple more times throughout the night. Through that work, we were able to distribute more than $4 million in financial aid to local businesses. Central to the success of this work was a commitment to equity, entrepreneurism, and economic mobility, those same themes I mentioned at the top of this presentation. And that round of grant funding and a little bit of loan making was especially important for underserved and underbanked entrepreneurs who couldn't find financial support from the traditional banking system. So these equity, entrepreneurism, and economic mobility priorities, they continue to serve us well as we're advancing the primary theme of equitable economic opportunity called forth in the strategic vision. We can look at the next slide, Mike. This next couple of slides provide you a summary of our policy making work, and it's meaning developing recommendations for council to confer on and make decisions about. These projects ultimately result in council action. And the first one we're going to talk about, and we can stay on this slide, is Tigard Made. This is a major overhaul of our employment lands, the zoning and the land use that dictate and guide development in our commercial property zones. This project focuses on fostering innovation and next generation job opportunities in a land constrained environment. And I didn't belabor that on the first map I showed you, but we all know we are in a land constrained environment. We do not have very many directions to grow, if any, out. This project also brings something that's unique to Tigard, or at least I haven't seen it happen in other cities. Through Tigard Made, we can bring our strategic vision priorities into our land use framework. And I'm super excited that Hope Pollard, who you've met before and will talk with again on March 8th, is leading this effort to update and refine and improve our employment lands. Ultimately, this could result in blending of commercial, industrial, and residential activity. And as you know, setting land use is a policy, fundamental policy responsibility of the city. Nobody else sets land use. We have a monopoly on that. So this is something we need to get right. And it will define how the local economy evolves over the next 20 years. I've belabored this because this is a significant body of work. Absolutely, Hope Pollard is in the lead on this. She's a fabulous planner in addition to our staff. But I'm pleased to be a part of that process. The other policy work we do is something I mentioned, the economic development roundtable, call it what you will, the gathering of myself and other economic development professionals from around Washington County. We get together to share best practices. We were instrumental in securing funding, CARES funding from Washington County. But this is the group that is a continued resource for us on upcoming topics of interest, including workforce development, broadband development, community development block grant funding for microenterprise, and even discussing the future of the regional land supply. So this is a group that does inform my approach and helps me better prepare you, council, for the policy decisions you make. The last policy type project I want to highlight is our upcoming electric mobility strategy. And I heard us talk a little bit about electric vehicles during the first presentation. This strategy is a collaboration with our transportation planning team, primarily Senior Transportation Planner Dave Roth. And this is a chance for us to use a TGM, Transportation Growth Management grant from ODOT to investigate implementation actions that encourage equitable adoption of electric mobility solutions for residents. So we are going to set out to identify and then elevate the needs of underserved and marginalized residents, just trying to make sure that electric mobility is not just the adoption of early adopters who can afford it, but that we're also helping people who have been negatively impacted in the past or are at risk of getting left behind during the mobility transition. So eventually you'll see some policy brought before you regarding electric mobility. Mike, we can go to this next slide. And I'm about to shift into what I call our economic foundations projects. These are the programs we started early upon my arrival at the city. They include the enterprise zone, which I'll cover briefly, the vertical housing development zone, and programs that you all are probably even more familiar with than I am, are Tiff grant programs. So let's start with the enterprise zone. And as you may know, we have state enabling legislation that allows us to create a property tax abatement, a 3 to 5 year property tax abatement for mostly for manufacturing firms if they make at least a $500,000 investment and if they increase their employment by at least 10%. So we and the other taxing authorities take a short-term 3 to 5 year tax abatement when we see companies making capital investments and growing the workforce. Right now, there are 5 firms enrolled in this program, and they're meeting their annual performance measures. This is the time of year I begin sharing this program with other manufacturers because they know about their capital investments years, maybe, and certainly before we do. So now's the time on an annual basis to share this program. And of course, this is the Tigard Lake Oswego Enterprise Zone. I know we have a water partnership with Lake Oswego, but probably the most exciting partnership is the Enterprise Zone partnership. Thank you for laughing, Mayor Snyder and everybody else. Yeah, this is a minor partnership.
Yeah, it's most important if you don't care about water.
But if you care about jobs and capital investment, it's a pretty good one. No, this is a minor partnership. We run this on behalf of Lake Oswego, meaning there's a little bit of property in Lake Oswego where they have manufacturers who can take part in this program. Right now, there's only one doing so. Let's look at the next slide. And that is another project we started many years ago, something that is coming to fruition and paying dividends for the city, both in downtown and in the Tigard Triangle. And this is the vertical housing development zone. This is a way to encourage or incite or support or incentivize first-story commercial activity with residential development above it. And remember, a couple of those strategic vision themes were focused on blending uses and making sure if people want to, they could live, work, recreate, shop without having to drive all across town. A vertical housing development zone is one way we do that. And that's defined by the green areas on the map. That's mostly downtown and much of the Tigard Triangle. And the exciting news is that we have 3 projects already completed. I say we, developers do this work, not us. We're simply providing that tax incentive to mix their uses to the tune of 677 new housing units and over 25,000 square feet of new commercial space in these. This is counting all 4 buildings, the 3 that have been completed and the 1 that's in process. So again, another powerful tool for cultivating the local economy, providing space for local retail and restaurant and professional and personal and professional service businesses to locate with residents immediately above them.
Lloyd, I want to interrupt you here because I just want to recognize the fact that for the council members that have not been around or you're not Councilor Newton and we're on staff, this is a specific tool that Mr. Purdy actually brought to the city of Tigard. None of us knew what this was. Nobody on our staff knew or was pushing for it and didn't even know about it. And having an economic development professional means that we get expertise that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And Lloyd, I just want, you're kind of stating this like somehow the city did it, and we did. I can remember being in some uncomfortable conversations with other taxing jurisdictions, including TVF&R right in the middle of one of those zones. But I just want to recognize you for the role that you play in things like this. This is 677 housing units and 25,000 square feet of commercial space that we likely may not have actually had we not moved forward with this. So sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was worth it.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I want to follow up too. And I was thinking the same thing on the last program, even though I think that was more familiar to folks, the enterprise zone. But Mr. Purdy, back when I was on staff and you were on council, did an excellent job of connecting the dots for everyone. And so when it was a time when we had some firms that were willing to step up and take advantage of it, he was there ready with the details. And so I wanted to point that out as well. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you both. That means a lot. I'm glad you're excited about those projects. I can't wait till you hear about some of our equity focused projects at the end of this presentation. I should also mention that while I might have started those programs, the vertical housing development zone is now managed by our economic development coordinator, Dylan DK Bemis. He's the one that tracks and works with those developers. So it's absolutely a team effort, Mayor Snyder, as you mentioned. Quickly, I'll cover some programs that I think you all are even more familiar with. So that is our tax increment finance district and the financial resources, thank you, Mike, that brings to the community. That includes basically 3 categories: investing in public infrastructure, and we see that through green streets and trails in the downtown in particular. You also know about the investments that we can make with property owners in downtown buildings, and a similar program in the Tiger Triangle that we're calling the Tiger Triangle Business Opportunity Fund. So that's a summary. Let's get into a little bit of the details so that I can be sure that everybody has the same foundation. The city's 2 tax increment finance districts, they do focus investment in areas that we expect, hope, and want to see economic growth. As the Town City Development Agency that you were convened as earlier in the evening, you are very familiar with those investments. Quick summary: we expect there to be a $4.2 million TIF investment in Universal Plaza. Main Street Green Street Phase 2 is a $1.2 million investment. And hold it right there, Mike. I'll catch up with you. You can stay right there. Since 2016, through the leadership of Sean Farley, our redevelopment manager, the TCDA has directly invested $4.4 million in TIF funds in housing, predominantly in downtown, but now getting ready to expand into the Triangle as well. That's, I guess, the most important point there. The matching grant funds then started in downtown, as you know. That program has evolved. We now have a program where we will award up to $50,000 for a restaurant business that wants to locate into downtown, and up to $25,000 for any other type of catalytic retail business, meaning a business where we think it'll help catalyze the streetscape. So since its creation, those programs have supported 29 downtown businesses, including well-beloved businesses like Symposium Coffee, Jeffrey Allen Gallery, Senate Game Bar. So we have here on the slide an example of the 2.6 to 1 match, meaning for every dollar the city has put into downtown facade grants, we've seen $2.6 in private investment to match against that. So a fabulous program for a very small TIF district. Let's talk on the next slide about the Tiger Triangle Business Opportunity Fund. This is new. I think you all know about it. It's just recently launched. We're just now marketing this to property owners, businesses, real estate professionals, our business advising partners. Again, the opportunity here is for $50,000 of tenant improvement matching funds for an eating and drinking establishment, and up to $25,000 for other businesses, with a goal, again, in line with the strategic vision of increasing business diversity in the Tiger Triangle. And the terms of that are similar to the one in downtown, as you know, a matching grant program. Let's take a look at something I'm maybe more excited about than I should be. No, I should be excited about this. This is our entrepreneurism, economic mobility, and equity-focused programs. These are new. These are programs we've been developing over the last 2 years. And again, entrepreneurism speaks to small micro enterprise. Economic mobility is a focus on our residents and helping build wealth and career pathways for the people who live in Tigard. And then equity focus is that overarching theme. There's 8 programs on this list. They support entrepreneurs, micro enterprise, and residents. And one that I'm most excited about, we can just jump to the next slide, Mike, is the Opportunity Cafe, our new business incubator at the library. I think many of you, almost all of you, were at the ribbon cutting back, well, was it only November of last year? This is our partnership with Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, MISO. They lease the space from us. They then sublease it to an entrepreneur from their network. You can meet in this picture, if you haven't met him in person while ordering a coffee, you can meet Israel Martinez. He receives financial, I don't know about financial support. I try not to pry too deeply, but I know he receives business advising support from Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon. He's a first-time entrepreneur, a Tigard resident, and he's opened El Quadrilatero at this program. And we're very excited about that still. This is leading us to something I'm equally excited about, LaunchPod. As you know, because you've authorized some ARPA funding to match some AARP funding, to match some Washington County funding, we are in the process of buying 2 mobile business incubators. If you say, what's a mobile business incubator? Maybe I just say food cart. 2 mobile business incubators that will, when we receive them later this year, operate along the same program concept. We will own them, we will lease them either directly to an entrepreneur that is receiving advising, or we will lease them to one of our 14 business advising partners, and they then will find their tenants for this. So this is a model that we're duplicating from Opportunity Cafe to LaunchPod. Let's go ahead and hit the next slide. And it's a program that my colleague Dylan DeKay Bemis has rolled out and manages. It's called Los Empresarios de Tigard. This slide is showing you the upcoming Spanish language, meaning Spanish only, presentations that we are offering to our local community of Latinx and Hispanic entrepreneurs. We're doing this now in partnership with Adelante Mujeres, because they are very well versed in working with Hispanic and Latinx entrepreneurs. So they'll be providing these trainings. They're helping us get the word out about this. It's a very good partnership. I think of this as a reintroduction of the program. COVID absolutely stopped this program dead in its tracks. We had a fabulous kickoff meeting with just over 100 entrepreneurs and 9 different business advising partners, where they got to do a round robin. And then, as you all know, COVID hit. So we've restructured this as a digital online program. But if we can get back in person, we will do that as well. Let's look at the next slide, our business advising and coaching. Right now, we have 2.5, almost 3 contracts out with partners, some of them on this list, where we are paying for them to be in Tigard. It's one thing for a business advising partner to be operating out of Portland or maybe in Forest Grove, like Adelante Mujeres. We're spending some of our money to make sure local entrepreneurs can connect with these partners. And similarly to these contracts, we also have a scholarship program where we don't tell a business which of these partners to work with. They simply tell us that they want to be working with Professional Business Development Group or SBDC or MISO. And if there's a cost to one of those programs, we'll cover some of that cost. So this is a new program we're rolling out this year. And again, it's a way to let businesses decide what the right choice is, who the right business advisor is for them amongst 12 different partners that we have confidence in. I think we can hit the next program. This is one of my, probably my second or maybe my most favorite. We're just now entering a social media marketing phase for this program. It's called Advanced Tigard. What we're willing to do with this program is help cover the training cost of a Tigard resident that is working in Tigard with a Tigard business if they have a career pathway. So if an employer and a Tigard resident think there's a future for that person at that company, but they need some training. They need a short course, a credential, not a 2-year or 4-year degree. We don't have that much money, but if we can get some short-term training to Tigard residents to help them advance their career with their current employer, we think that's a win. So this is that program. We're doing this in partnership with IRCO, the Immigrant Refugee Community Organization. They do obviously work with immigrant refugees, but they do work with everybody else as well, meaning any type of resident who needs career coaching, they have career coaches. So this provides skill training to our residents. It reduces a hiring challenge for employers, and it improves a career prospect for residents. I'm super excited about this program. We're just now putting a heavy marketing push on it. I will let you know when we have success with it.
Lloyd, I'm seeing it all over social media. So, I mean, just FYI.
That's great to hear. Leandro, from our communications team, was excited to launch a social media campaign for this, tailored for this. We took some videos of some of the career coaches, and we're spending some resources, time, effort to get it out there. And so I'm glad you're seeing it, Mayor. That's great to hear. I think I have just 2, maybe 3 more programs to tell you about. You recall, with a theme of housing and economic security, you authorized $1.5 million in ARPA funding, ARPA funding, to create what we kind of call a missing middle revolving loan fund, a way to provide bridge construction loans for development, to provide the affordable homes we need. We're working with 3 CDFI partners, community development financial institutions. These are CDFI partners with a focus on housing, slightly different than the ones I was talking about earlier that focus on businesses, though Craft 3 is in both categories, so you'll hear their name a lot. Again, this program is something we're starting from whole cloth, and we're excited about it. And I think we'll have some program information for you in the next couple of weeks. The next step on that will be to socialize this idea with some developers and ask them what they think about this type of structured revolving loan fund. And Mike, go ahead and cue up the next slide for me. This is another project I'm super excited about. It's a little complicated, so I'm going to slow up, which is unusual for me here. A community investment trust. This is something we're working on with Unite Oregon and SWEC, the Southwest Equity Coalition. We're funding a feasibility study to look for 5 to 7 sites in Tigard that are suitable for commercial rent leasing. So it's a commercial property program. But what's exciting about this is residents in Tigard, residents in the 7223 zip code, have an opportunity at a very approachable and accessible scale, like $75 a month, get to start investing in local property. It becomes a transformative tool for neighborhood revitalization. Think of, going to a coffee shop, for instance, in your neighborhood, and knowing that you're part owner of that building, right? And you're frequenting a local business, and you're building real estate equity in a very approachable way. This is like REIT, a REIT that wealthy people can invest in from the stock market, but it makes it a local and makes it an approachable tool. So it's a wealth building tool for residents. It's a business incubation tool, not in a strict sense like our Opportunity Cafe, but it's a chance to lease and rent spaces to a wide range of entrepreneurs. So this is exciting to me. Admittedly, the first step is the feasibility study, where we look for locations where this might work. There is one program in Portland now, and we're seeing if we can duplicate it here. This community investment trust has been picked up by some other cities across the country, but my hope is that we can be the second one in the state, or at least in the region. And I think I've breezed through this fairly quickly. So the last program I want to mention is something we'll talk about much more in the next presentation. But this is potentially Tigard Cares Round 6. We're building on success with this. As you can tell by the graphic, in 2020, we distributed just about $4.2 million in funding to businesses through a combination of grants and loans. We did this mostly in partnership with MISO, a little bit with Craft 3, and it all began when Mayor Snyder came to me and said, please do something with $200,000 and please move quickly. And the result was, again, those things that many cities haven't tried to do yet: revolving loan funds, grant programs, which everybody has done. The difference here was we were able to secure some Washington County CARES funding, some more state CARES funding, and in fact, even that initial investment was mostly repaid to the city. So good program. And we also used an equity lens on this. We looked at socially vulnerable neighborhoods around the city and said, if a business is in a socially vulnerable neighborhood, we think it's a good idea to try to help stabilize those businesses during the COVID closures, because stabilizing a business in that neighborhood helps that neighborhood as well. So this was one of our first time we brushed up against a very intentional equity theme and equity lens. And again, we've carried that throughout the last 2 years, and I just ran down eight programs that very much have an equity theme and a theme of focusing on micro enterprise. So the closing slide is my chance to say we've just reviewed 16 economic development programs. They cultivate an economic landscape that welcomes new businesses, advances equity, advances entrepreneurism, and improves economic mobility. And as fast as I move through that, I'll take a breath now and pause to see if you have questions, some conversation, some thoughts. And we can probably close the PowerPoint. Yeah.
It's a lot of information, Lloyd. I mean, if people question what we're doing on economic development and business support, et cetera, and where we've been over the last 8 years, that was a good summary. Who's got questions or comments on that presentation? I know we're going to talk in a bit about Tiger Care 6, so I want to separate those conversations. Who's got questions on this? Council President Lube?
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming the amount of things that we're doing in so many different ways. And, you know, I found your memo really helpful and really detailed and informative. I have a question, though, regarding some of the spaces, perhaps, you know, along Main Street, or, for instance, I know in one of the new developments in River Terrace, there's a bunch of apartment buildings that are going to have another 24,000 square feet of retail space underneath. And just as far as what you see potentially the city's role or the economic development department's role in attracting businesses for those spaces. Obviously the $50,000 incentive to get downtown is, I think, hopefully pretty sweet, and we'll see some people taking advantage of it. But like, you know, businesses like potentially a grocery store. I mean, a Trader Joe's would be lovely. I'm just saying that publicly. And, you know, when do we start talking to these businesses to say this is coming in this area and we'd love to see you there, knowing that it's private development, but trying to, you know, maybe assist them along the way?
Right. Councilman Lube, that's a great question, Council President. From my perspective, the private sector needs to invite us in and ask for that, right? It's their property. We can set the environment like we're trying to do. We can make the whole city downtown, the future River Terrace, the Triangle. We can make those areas as welcoming and nurturing for businesses as possible through programs that, you know, waive business licenses, offer training grants, offer the advanced Tiger program for employees. We can, clearly we're doing a lot to make the environment healthy, supportive, and conducive. It is up to the private sector to tenant their spaces, and they have the tools to do that through commercial real estate brokers. We've never turned someone away when they've asked us for help, but our help is then also, as you mentioned, fairly limited to grant awards. You know, when like the Trader Joe's thought, in all my many years doing downtown revitalization before I came here, you know, that was the golden apple that everybody wanted, a grocery store in their downtown. When the environment's right, you don't have to convince them to come. They show up when there's enough people with enough discretionary income living in a close enough area. we're not trying to convince them to come. We don't even have to make the case. They show up, and that's a lot of what we've been trying to do with the TIF finance district is increase the number of people, and therefore the disposable income, the dollars that we like to spend, so there's an automatic choice for that grocer, small format grocer, or a mix of retail or restaurants. The other challenge is the quality of space, which is why we have these TIF building improvement grants, whether it's external or internal. Our property owners need to make space that businesses want to be in. I can't do that for them. So those are my very genuine thoughts on I guess, local scale recruitment. With that said, last week, it was an unusual week, but I think I had 4, maybe it was 5 different businesses approach me about wanting to find a Tigard-based location. I know Tamale Boy was in the news announcing that they're looking for space in Tigard. And we did a walkabout with Jaime Soltero last Thursday, met with some people from outside of McMinnville that want to open up a coffee shop somewhere in the city, maybe the Triangle. So we're always trying to find those entrepreneurs. The other way those entrepreneurs come to us are through our business advising partners. Those are the organizations I mentioned that are working with entrepreneurs before we even see them. So we're always putting our programs in front of those partners so they can share with businesses, hey, we think you should look at Tigard. That's coming from a trusted partner, not just some guy trying to recruit businesses. So at the small scale, we do a lot of that work. When do we talk to Trader Joe's? I'm not sure. That's something we can work on. I mean, not just that specifically, but as a broad
the concept. No, thank you. That's really helpful to get that perspective and that knowledge. And I just want to say there's so many programs, that I'm proud of, and especially, our reaction to COVID is one of them. The Opportunity Cafe. I think anytime anybody mentions it, I mean, they just fall all over themselves with how wonderful it is and how great it is to have that back in the library. And so I just want to congratulate you on all the things that we're doing at the city, and it allows us to continue to brag regionally and nationally about our city. So thank you for that.
We can't forget that all that happened and Lloyd took a 2-year hiatus at a different organization and then came back too. I forgot about that part. Councilor Newton.
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, thank you, Mr. Purdy. Excellent presentation. And I agree with Councilor Lube. The memo was really helpful. It was really great to walk down memory lane and hear about all those programs that we have going. I continue to be amazed by how creative, responsive you are in our economic development program, and how much you have always valued connections and being connected with folks, businesses out in the community to hear what their needs are and how proactive. Now, my question is on the Community Investment Trust, you said 97223 zip code, but quite a bit of Tigard is in the 97224 zip code. Was that just a misspeak?
It wasn't a misspeak. I just didn't rattle off both of them.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, they're set up so that the zip code, the local area defines.
Right.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Okay. And then my broader question, it's interesting to hear the direction of all the programs are taking. Do you think it's really important that, and you mentioned it, you talked about it quite a bit actually, that we try to find ways in the broadest sense, large companies, mid-sized, smaller companies, entrepreneurs, to keep people here, that live here, that work here, because we have such a, I mean, I lived in Tigard and worked in Tigard, but that's such a small number. Is that driving a little bit some of the priorities you're setting and some of the ways you're looking at programs is to try to keep our residents working here? Does that enter into it quite a bit, or is that a different lens?
Councilwoman Newton, that's a good question. As Mayor Snyder mentioned, I did take a hiatus for 2 years and worked at the regional level, and that opened my eyes to, we are part of a regional economy. I don't think it's well served for us to spend too much time trying to keep a Tigard resident in Tigard working in Tigard, right? That's just not the way a regional economy works. We'd be like a salmon swimming upstream. What we can do is improve the economic mobility certainly for our most historically underserved residents. We can find ways to lift them up or help them lift themselves up. So I am more focused on our residents through economic mobility than I used to be, but it's less about trying to keep people employed locally. Every Tigard resident that has a job, the 25,000 or so, they could all work in Tigard. There's a job title, a commensurate job title with their name on it. That's just not the way the region works. So it's something I've struggled with and thought about. I just don't know that we can ever expect too many more of our residents who live here to also be working here.
So it's a little bit more about making sure the companies that are here, we maintain and can grow, and they can get the employees they need from wherever that is. And to your immediate point was that the folks that are here that could benefit from some economic mobility also can get the help they need. So that's really what you're looking at. Okay, that's helpful. When you camped on that low number, I thought, So anyway, okay, that helps. Thank you.
It's a low number that I don't know that we can change, and it's not too dissimilar for the other cities. We're not unusual in that commuting pattern. Most residents go somewhere else across the region for their job.
Councillor Shaw, let's go to you, and then I've got a question or comment that kind of follows on Councillor Newton.
Mayor, if you have something that falls on Councillor Newton, if you want to ask now, because I have some other points to raise.
Lloyd, I guess I'm thinking about the program that you described around that's only eligible to residents of Tigard who also work in Tigard. I know that was done on purpose. When I think about helping economic mobility for our residents, I'm not sure it matters whether they work in Tigard or not. And I guess I just want to push on whether that's the right way to be approaching that. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's a good thought. Your line of reasoning is very sound. I just don't have enough money to help everybody. I know
so that's a trying to be sort of manage within the resources we have, not be, if we had unlimited resources, we want to do both. Okay.
Right. That's a matter of one, is a new program. Two, I just don't have the budget to do as much as I'd like. I'd love it if we could help any resident who's trying to skill up and advance their career with their current employer. That was the other component of that program. This is a way to help our existing employers cultivate their talent and not have to go back into the labor pool. So there's a win.
It's a both and. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I also will just make the comment that I don't know if you're familiar with I assume you are, with the PCC Future Connect program, but they're wanting to meet with, or not wanting, we're meeting later this week, I think. They asked to meet with me. So I don't know if you want to be involved in that conversation, but it might make sense. And that's just, go ahead.
Are you meeting with Pam Hester? Is that who you're meeting with? Probably.
Christina, somebody, I think. Anyway.
Somebody else? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and I remember you've asked us about that a couple months ago. I still have that email, waiting to see how our year-end budget numbers fall out. That's the type of program, if we had some unallocated end-of-year money, we could put it into some type of scholarship.
Okay.
That's the program for.
Councillor Shaw, thank you for being patient.
Yeah, that's for Tigard residents, youths who are going to PCC. Is that the PCC Connects would help local students getting into the community college system.
Great. And thank you for the presentation. That was very informative and lots of tools, lots of programs, lots of tools. Just a few questions. You had mentioned in the first part of the presentation, the strategic vision and community alignment, and you had chosen 4 out of the 8. And curious why just the 4. You said they're the most important, but I believe the council set all 8. So I just was curious if you could speak to why those 4 and not all 8.
Those 4 were the most important to me. I didn't want to use the PowerPoint space to list out all 8. And some of them have some overlap. Blending land uses, making sure that residents can walk and get access to jobs and services in a very efficient manner. So some of them of the 8, a couple of them are just not exactly duplicative, but close enough where I think the 4 explain it well enough. Did I answer your question, Councilwoman Shaw?
Yeah, I guess part of my concern is these are all great tools, but there's no strategic plan. There's nothing that weaves it or ties it all together. And part of the reason we have those vision is to help the development of a strategic plan. And I'm curious because a lot of the data that you've presented, in particular, like the Tigard's workflow, inflow and outflow, and I'm wondering if that was pre-COVID, because I got to imagine that we don't have 41,000 still commuting in, given COVID, we have 24,000 commuting out. So if you could just address if those are current numbers or those pre-COVID numbers, and then I have some other questions for you too.
Right. On the commute in, commute out graphic, in reality, I guess a more accurate way to say that would be people with an employer outside of the city. During COVID times, no one's commuting like they used to. So those are residents somewhere else in the region that have an employer in the city. Whether or not they're actually literally commuting in is I guess not even debatable. During COVID, there was not that commuting pattern. So more accurate to say, living in Tigard with a job in Tigard, living somewhere else in the region with a job in Tigard, or living in Tigard with a job somewhere else in the region. And it's just a informality or a colloquialism to call that the commuting pattern. Pre-COVID, that was absolutely the commuting pattern. So that is accurate for the I think last year or 2 years ago, given it's not actual commuting.
That's helpful. Thank you.
That's one. 2, the strategic vision and the strategic plan does guide everything we're doing. So all the projects, when we start one up or when we check in on a project, which is monthly, we tie it back to that strategic vision, the plan, and the 8 different focus areas that are enumerated in the strategic plan. So we don't have a standalone economic development strategy that supersedes the strategic vision. We've brought our programs in under that umbrella of a document. Does that answer your I think your first question about the?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't expect a strategic plan to supersede the city plan, but most cities do have economic development strategic plans that then feed up directly into a city strategic plan. So I guess I was under the assumption that we would have a strategic plan for economic development specifically. But that's good to know. And perhaps I would suggest, and part of the reason is if you also look at the data that you had presented, if you look at the number of firms with manufacturing, their annual wage is substantially high and actually equals professional, what some would call white collar, but yet we don't seem to be attracting those to the city. So that's a concern of mine. So I guess overall, I think the programs you have are great. They're great numbers. They're great, factoids are great to say, but overall, I'm very concerned that the city does not have a coherent strategic plan that is based on high wage jobs, accurate outflow and inflow numbers. And also the last one you mentioned, like a REIT, there is one just like that. It's the Rockwood District in East Portland. There's a very specific reason they have that. I would say that I don't know if Tigard necessarily fits that criteria, but I'd love to hear more perhaps at a later date. But I would just advocate that we have a more robust strategic plan in which the tools you mentioned and the programs you mentioned just feed into. That'd be my recommendation.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Goodhouse and then Councillor Newton.
Thank you. And I was noticing the time, and we might have to do a continuation of this conversation because I have a lot to say. I appreciate the presentation. It was really thorough. Kind of similar to what Councillor Shaw said, there's a lot of programs. My one thing is when I brought this forward and wanted to have this discussion was a lot what I'm hearing, and still I think there's a huge disconnect, is really the types of businesses that are in Tigard and the types of businesses the residents want. It goes anywhere from, 10 years ago, I've been hearing from residents, they want a Main Street, a Tigard, somewhere they can go out on a date night. They can go get pizza, they can get ice cream, they can go some places, they don't have to leave the town that they love. And I still have that conversation. In the TCAC interviews, I hear about, well, what's going on downtown? Why is there so many empty shops? Why is there insurance, real estate, so forth? Why is there empty buildings? Why do we not have a place that we can go down there? Why do we have a vibrant, active, downtown Tigard or the Triangle? And then what I hear from businesses a lot, and I know I'm kind of jumping around and there's a lot, but and I hear this is daily, is why do cities like Hillsborough, Beaverton, all the cities around us, Oregon City, why do they have an active list of what they want to see in their city and are actively pursuing that? You mentioned that you can't bring those people, but constantly our own businesses are getting letters and calls and outreach from those cities coming into here, asking places, even Main Street businesses, Triangle businesses, trying to pay for them to relocate to the other cities. They're putting up money to pay for their rent, to move them. They're taking businesses that maybe shouldn't be on a Main Street and off Main Street and moving them. There's businesses down there where we could, we have, and they're starting to get some resentment downtown, at least downtown Tigard, the Triangle, but especially downtown where you have an open space and they're like, oh, hopefully this will be something else that helps alongside our business or draws people. And then like an IT firm goes in there. I don't want to say anything wrong with an IT firm, but when you have something that goes there that maybe only people come to get their computer repaired and leave, that doesn't add to the walkability for people to do business up and down the street. And we don't really have any kind of strategic plan of what we want to see, what we want to do, something we can refer to. And my biggest fear is, and actually concern is, there is a huge disconnect. I opened a business, I've on purpose not signed up with anything from the email I started my business with. I haven't got not a single email from the city. I never got a welcome packet. I never got anything. I've talked to a couple of businesses that have started in Tigard, and they haven't got any emails, welcome packets. They haven't got anything. And a lot of the businesses in downtown or Tigard feel like they don't have the communication of the city. They're not being heard. They're not being what they want to have do to grow. And the grants, there's every month there's the TDA mixers that all the different businesses get together. And now they do nothing but badmouth the program because there's all kinds of roadblocks. I think that there's a whole bunch of things happening. We have these programs, but we have too many programs and we're not actually looking at the results, what's happening, what we're getting from them. I know I'm being a little blunt and a little, maybe worked up about it, but it's because I hear this every day from residents. I hear it from the TCAC meetings every week or every month about what they want to see in Tigard, what they want to get done. And every time there's no really plan of what we want to bring businesses, how we're going to do it, how we're going to work with the businesses. And I don't know. I mean, we have your presentation was great, thorough and everything like that. And you look at it and think that we are doing great. We have a lot of businesses, we have a lot of different opportunities in here, but there's also that overshadows the huge problem underneath that's not being addressed. I mean, I'll be quiet for a moment, but there's so much more to talk about, so much more to do, so much I've heard to that I can give examples of for the grants, the businesses, even businesses that people go to regularly are talking about moving out of Tigard because there's no assistance or other businesses. So we're also looking at losing some of those core ones we have in the Triangle or downtown because we're just not listening. We're not working together.
Councillor Goodhouse, I don't recall this level of discussion happening and setting this in the way you're describing it as a council goal in our goal setting last year. And maybe it wasn't as apparent to you at the time, but this is a pretty major concept or sort of series of actions and thoughts that you're having, and and perhaps that Councillor Shaw is also pointing to some extent. And I guess I'm wondering if we need to reevaluate, given the statements that are being made. You know, that would be the time that we would sort of direct and allocate our priorities and resources around this. So I'm not saying that we don't have council goals that touch some of this, but we didn't ask for those things in the last year. I mean, I don't think that's the direction we provided to staff on this front. And maybe we need to reevaluate that. But I think, to be in fairness to our team, we need to recognize that.
Well, and I don't think that was without me not mentioning it, because I know I mentioned during the goals, maybe it just didn't rise up that we had enough people to focus on it or so forth. But I think when we're talking about economic development, we have, you know, TIF money. A lot of the things that already been broken down are things that we are already, that fall under that economic umbrella, development umbrella. We're just not doing it at the level we should to, and it needs to be addressed. So I don't think maybe it needs to be a council goal or not, but it's already something that falls in part of that presentation that Lloyd already just gave, that we're really missing the mark on drastically.
Councillor Newton.
Okay, well, back to Councillor Shaw's comment about the mix of businesses that we have. The planner in me, and this is dangerous because I haven't been a planner since 1988, but the planner in me thinks that maybe part of the issue is our zoning constrains us to industrial and those kinds of uses. We don't have a lot of land zoned that way. And that's why the Tigard Maid project could be of some help. You know, we're trying to relook at how we allow businesses in what zone. So I remember being a planner and that being a frustration. Just our zoning did not accommodate those kinds of businesses. So that may still be the case. And I guess to Councillor Goodhouse's comments, I mean, if we've got a lot of folks out there with these kinds of concerns, I feel sort of like I knew that it was this way to a degree, but I don't know who they're talking to. And maybe we should have some sort of a workshop on this or something, because I concur with you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not saying there aren't things we could do differently in the downtown to encourage certain businesses and that, but I do feel like we gave staff some direction and, you know, they're reporting on that. So if we need to have a discussion to really vet out some of Councillor Goodhouse's comments, I'm open to that. But I sort of along the lines of what you are thinking, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that we gave specific directions to emphasize those kinds of, you know, activities, which are not bad activities. But if we need to expand or change our direction, then I think we should have a conversation about that. Thank you.
All right. So on that point, I'm going to suggest that we actually take that topic for City Manager Reimer. I think we need a future workshop discussion on this topic with at least an hour to an hour and a half of time in the next month or so, if possible. And I would suggest re-reviewing the tape of this meeting and getting kind of prepared for a little bit of a a delving into this in more detail, and perhaps some connection with Councillor Goodhouse and Councillor Shaw, perhaps before. Maybe every single city councillor and myself, we probably all have different perspectives to share. And then to Councillor Newton's point, maybe staff can brainstorm how we might seek some additional feedback around these points from downtown businesses and from businesses throughout the city, though I hear these comments kind of focused on downtown mostly. Councillor Newton, go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess one of my biggest concerns is that I don't know that this is being shared with the folks here at the city that are working on these things. So I would also be interested in making sure that the businesses that have these concerns are comfortable sharing them. You know, if they're, you know, that concerns me. I want them to feel like we do want to hear. This is news to me, and I talk to a lot of people in the community, not a lot of downtown businesses, I will agree, but you know, it concerns me if businesses don't feel like they have the city's ear.
Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank Councilor Newton for historical perspective. Thank you. And and it's actually with the Tiger Maid project that really flagged it for me, because if our data is not accurate and if we don't know which businesses we're attracting, given what the high wages are and who we want to keep potentially, those were my concerns that I've highlighted. So I look forward to having kind of a, not sure what you called it, Mara, but a further discussion on this. Thank you.
City Manager Reimer, you had put your camera on. I don't know if you wanted to say anything or if you ended up mostly listening, but do you want to comment?
Yes, primarily just to acknowledge follow-up meeting. You know, Lloyd and I had talked about in the past, trying to gather your input tonight and then deciding if we can answer the things tonight or if we have to come back so we can look at it. And you know, Councilor Goodhouse has shared some of his specifics with me in the past in terms of concerns, and so we can continue that conversation as well.
I think it probably needs to be, I guess I'll reemphasize this, it needs to be set up in a sort of a working session type of format. All right. Yep, Councilor Goodhouse, did you have more you wanted to say?
Yes, one of the things I was going to add is that a great resource to, if we can compile or somehow get information just from the previous years from the TCAC. A lot of what I've said is what's been said at those meetings, and somehow has not gotten onto the council or to the rest of the city. But a lot of this, what I've said, is nothing new. For years, it's been said that, you know, we need to have these items. How can we attract these businesses? How can we do it? There's so many different thoughts and ideas that have been thrown out there, from businesses to everything. That there's even, and I'm just being a little more frank here, there's even a kind of a thought process is that businesses don't want to be on the TCAC because they bring forward ideas, mention ideas that need to be done. They're not heard, so then they decide, well, why am I on it? So, but if you go back through the years, there's a lot of this stuff has been said in those meetings as well.
And by not heard, you mean whatever they're suggesting doesn't end up getting done?
It's just said there, and then nothing. It doesn't go past that. So it's basically said in the meeting, and then it said and stops there. It doesn't go anywhere. Nothing's done. Nothing addressed.
Yeah, I mean, that may be just a failure of communication as well, or closing a loop, or just because it's mentioned as an idea at a meeting doesn't mean it's a good idea, or that the committee is going to direct it to be done and direct the staff. Like, that's the council's responsibility. So if we're not doing a good job of listening to the TCAC, which they were, I think, just here, and I don't recall much of this coming up, I'm not sure how to interpret that, but we may need to have City Manager Reimer. I think there may be a need to have the TCAC chair and or some committee members to represent them in this discussion, as well as that element is sort of being raised. Let's get to the bottom of all of it.
And one last thing, apologize, is the other thing I've asked City Manager Reimer about was if there's a way to track the grant process with the Tiff funds, as far as people who have applied for them, but maybe if they haven't gone anywhere, what were the reasons why they didn't move forward anymore? Was it something where you know, they just stopped, but did we ever follow back up with them? So it'd be good to have kind of a matrix to see who's applied for them, where they got stopped, where they got stuck at. Did we follow back up with them or not? There was a recent example, and this is probably a conversation for another day, but I gave City Manager Reimer of one that that just got stopped because the applicant had to do a $5,000 application fee and just stopped, but there was no follow-up with the city of what to do or why that was a problem and how to get past roadblocks. So we do get those either businesses that would start. It was gonna be a makerspace in downtown Tiger that would have been great, but just stopped because they saw the $5,000 application fee and didn't move forward, and it was a maybe on that point. So I think there's a lot of spots where are we stopping and what can we do to fix these programs?
As we're talking about individual situations, I also want to point out the council's role in all this and our roles as elected officials, and that being distinctively different from that of operating the city and running the day-to-day operations of the city. Our responsibilities for setting policy and direction, allocating funds, setting priorities, and some of what is being described is very specific and individual. And I understand that we all have those conversations and have that feedback, but our conversation that we're scheduling for the future needs to be focused not on individual situations. From my perspective, that is not our role as a council.
Oh, and I didn't mean to imply that it always helps if there's an example to refer to for, you
Sure.
know, the city manager Reimer asked me to give some examples so he could know more what was going on. So I completely agree that it's not our job to delve into the minute details or actually get into that, but if there's an overall process, then that's what we need to look at. If there's an overall process, if something's getting roadblock or we're not following up, then that's where I think we need to at least direct staff.
All right, so I just want to acknowledge that we are 23 minutes behind, and we already were scheduled till 9:30 with executive session. So let's keep that in mind as we're moving forward. Next topic's very important. Item number 7, consider Tigard Cares 6 Business Assistance COVID Recovery Program. Mr. Purdy.
Happy to join you again. On this presentation, at the end of it, we'll be asking council to consider authorizing an initial allocation of $500,000 of American Recovery Plan Act, ARPA funding for a financial assistance program to support businesses, and authorizing the council authorizing the city manager to increase that amount to a sum total of $750,000 if sufficient need is identified in the local economy. So a total ask of $750,000 for business financial aid as a ceiling. And with that in mind, thank you, Mike. Let's understand a little more about what's happening in the, well, at least the national economy. I can't get these numbers for the region, the state, or locally, but we know nationally that consumer spending is up. This is a fabulous sign for all of us and the local economy that we hold so dear. The trend line is trending the right way from the depth of the pandemic. Let's look at the next slide. It shows a similar good trend, actually. This was from December I lost a zero there. December 2001 to December of 2021, the total graph. Notice since the shock of the pandemic and the layoffs and the closures of businesses, how unemployment is continuing to decrease. It's improved a further little bit in the first quarter that we're wrapping up. But there's a couple of these trends to keep in mind. These are the good ones. Let's look at, in the next slide, how we're having, no surprise, an unequal, at least employment recovery. This data shows for the state how employers are characterizing jobs that are difficult to fill. And absolutely, if you're trying to hire people now, it's a challenge. Compounding with that, we see not every business sector. This is data from the Oregon Employment Department, and this is for Washington County, the numbers here. These are the job losses, meaning there's just this many fewer jobs, 5.9% fewer jobs in private education and health, or leisure and hospitality. There's 5.6% fewer jobs. Personal and other services is not doing so bad, but these aren't every business sector. These are just the 4 or 5 slowest to recover jobs coming out of the pandemic. And let's hit the next slide. Some other data we can look at is contravening the consumer spending is trending the right way. Overall, nationally, we see that there's not as many people frequenting retail and recreation or groceries and pharmacies, while good news is a lot more people out in the parks. The first two graphics, again, national trends, just giving us a sense that consumer spending is up, but consumer spending at local places of business is down from pre-COVID levels. So that's some context to keep in mind. Let me catch up with my notes here and talk about the rest of this presentation. This is a summary of what I just said. COVID, the pandemic, the health pandemic, the closure orders have amplified some inequities in the workforce system. We're seeing continued increase in baby boomer retirements. We're seeing changes, structural changes in the economy. We're seeing supply chain challenges that are impacting local businesses. They're impacting every sector, in fact. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide, Mike. So what can we do about that? Well, federal ARPA funding does allow the city to use some of the funding for business assistance for businesses that have been impacted negatively by COVID-19. And at this point, you could say almost every business sector has, almost every business sector. So they continue to talk about in the ARPA guidelines some key business sectors that are automatically eligible for ARPA grant funding or business assistance or loan funding. That's micro enterprise. We talked about them in the previous presentation, 10 or fewer employees, hospitality, travel, and tourism sectors. So those 1, 2, 3 sectors plus micro enterprise, meaning small businesses, have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. And we can, if council wanted to, we could outright provide some type of business financial assistance program to businesses in those sectors. Other sectors can be included as well. They just have to document and show some type of negative COVID impact. So Mike, share the next slide with us, please. What we're proposing is a financial assistance, a financial aid program for businesses that has 2 parts. We'd call it Tiger Cares Round 6 because we've done 5 previous rounds of Tiger Cares. For a grant program, we'd recommend starting with a need-based application. We don't know the full amount of need in the city right now. As I mentioned in one of the previous follow-up emails that you all were, that Steve, City Manager Reimer shared with you, I've only had 2 requests from businesses in the past couple months for some type of financial aid. That doesn't mean it's not there. That just means I've only heard 2 businesses. So what we're proposing is a need-based application process where when we announce this grant program, we use the intake form of the application to assess a true legitimate need, knowing, like our other economic development programs, we don't have enough money to help everybody who wants funding. So these are a couple of the examples of the questions we would ask in a need-based, at least a grant application. And the next slide, sharing with you something we saw at the last presentation, which was a summary of how we did a great deal of grant making when we had just about $4 million of federal money. That money had to be given as grants. That was a stipulation of the federal CARES program. Any programs we did with loans early in that process were using City of Tigard money. And the rules for ARPA funding are, again, slightly different, more flexible. We have more latitude. I should point out on this program that we, again, had an equity focus. We were focusing on small entrepreneurs, the most vulnerable. Those were the entrepreneurs that are often underbanked. They don't have access to traditional banking resources. That means women, minority, veterans. Of that, Tigard Cares, several rounds of financial aid, 41% of our grants went to minority entrepreneurs, 51% went to women entrepreneurs, 97 were given to small businesses, not micro enterprise. I'd have to run a different calculation to find out how many micro enterprise businesses received previous funding from us. I'm just giving you all a sense of where we're coming from as we move into the next slide, which is a couple of questions for your consideration. Authorize staff to create this program, Taggart Cares Round 6, a program of financial aid for businesses. Allocate an initial $500,000 for financial assistance. Authorize the city manager to increase that amount if through intake of applications we see there's more need, up to $750,000. And the question for us, I think, before us today is what proportion of the funding should go to grants versus loans. I've offered, I didn't put it in this presentation because it's something we're working on right up until last week. I'm willing to recommend that we start with $100,000 in initial grant funding availability, with the ability to increase that to by another $250,000 if need merits. So that's $350,000 in grant funding, with the balance going to some type of loan program to support businesses, not those that are impacted right now, but moving forward, moving out of COVID as a recovery program. I mentioned that because in the follow-up emails that were shared with all of you today, and I think late last week, I enumerated the difference between a grant program that's helping somebody that's in critical need, the wolf is at the door, so to speak, or use the analogy of they need a pint of blood. Get that to them immediately. We don't have enough money to do that for everybody, nor is every business in that situation like they were back in 2020. Likely there are businesses that are putting their eyes on recovery and would benefit from a loan that helps them grow, helps build their credit score. Yes, cost more, but it also, in some cases, triples or more the amount of money we can get out into the economy. So that's a very short setup for, we can finish the slide. Thanks, Mike.
We should have that slide put back up so we stay on track.
Okay. And again, I'll enumerate, we are recommending a hybrid program, a combination of grants and loans. That's something I mentioned in the follow-up emails. I mentioned grants in a one-time infusion of capital for an acute critical need, compared to loans that help a business scale and grow, because those businesses are confident they have a revenue stream to meet that as they move forward. We have several partners, CDFI, community development, financial institutions. I mentioned those in the follow-up emails that we can turn to. They have products that are what I would call off the shelf. They don't have to make a bespoke program just for us. For grants, we would do a need-based approach, which saves everybody time compared to having to do some type of needs assessment in the community, and then try to figure out how to meet that need. We can do it as part of the process. So those are the highlights.
So I want to thank Council President Lube and Councilor Shaw for their extremely robust level of questions beforehand. I felt like in some cases, not in a bad way, but it was almost like a deposition was being taken. So that was good, and I appreciated those and the responses. So I guess I just want the public to know that there was a lot of questions asked and answered even before we got to this session. That information certainly available to the public if people ever want to review it. And we can certainly go over much of that if people have questions or want to have more discussion about them. I will also share that I've been communicating with City Manager Reimer, and given that this topic really deserves attention and time, and I want us to have the time to do that, and the fact that the total Tyler project update is not time sensitive, City Manager Reimer and I, hopefully it's okay with IT Director Nolup, we are going to move the total Tyler project update to a different time so that we can spend adequate time on this topic. Councilor Goodhouse?
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off if you're still
No,
going.
that's okay. That's okay.
So I was just going to throw a couple of my thoughts on this. One thing during the other CARES programs we had and talking with businesses, it's a little different because we're coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, fingers crossed. But when you look at loan versus grant, if people are unsure of what's going on with their business, or as Lloyd mentioned, that if, kind of the wolf's knocking at the door, the last thing you want to do is take a loan, knowing that if you're not going to survive, have to pay that back. So if I had to give any input, it would say grants over loans, ones that have to be paid back. The other thing is, the only thing I've heard from businesses is, slower businesses do like the Omicron and so forth. But the other thing is, businesses can't get back up and going and get on their feet because they don't have employees. And so the biggest thing they're doing is they're putting help wanted out there. I was in a place the other day and they couldn't open back up their dining room because they didn't have enough employees, or they don't even have a driver, and they can't find anyone. So I don't know if there's a way to maybe work into this. There's some way to help with hiring bonuses for some of these places that can't find employees, or I don't know how you'd work that in or what you do, but some kind of assistance or help so they can get some employees to get up and going. Maybe they just use that money for a hiring bonus. I don't know how that works or structured, what they can or can't use it for, but I know that's another big hurdle, is that businesses just need that little bit of a kickstart with with employees to get going.
Council President Loop.
Yeah, I honestly just want to respond to something and ask, I guess, for some clarification from Councilor Goodhouse in regards to what you just said regarding a loan versus a grant, that if a business is, in a certain situation, that we should be giving them grants instead of loans. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I think during the last year and a half, if someone's already worried about what's going on, if they're already have to live off savings or pull from savings or live from credit cards just to get by, taking another loan is very attractive. And there's a lot of people I know, some of the programs were out there that didn't apply for it because it was a loan. They said, well, why would I want to take a loan if I'm not sure if I'm going to survive, and that might follow me still if my business closes. So it's a bit of a deterrent to grab for that safety rope. If it's something that has to be paid back or there's strings attached to it, it's easier if it's something I can say, okay, I'm already having to figure out how to pay for everything else, have debts going, I'm taking away from my life savings, maybe taking a loan from my house or whatever they might be doing. It's just been, at least I've heard, a deterrent from business owners wanting to take something that might just be another anchor for them.
Thank you for the clarification. It does, and I'd like to respond to it, that I think that logic is incredibly fiscally irresponsible for us to say, and that was one of the questions that I had sort of sent to Lloyd and Steve, I think it was our city manager Reimer yesterday, is, we're not, the world isn't the same. We're coming out of this pandemic, and consumerism looks different, businesses look different, and we need businesses that are adapting and changing to it. And it feels incredibly fiscally irresponsible to give out a bunch of money to businesses that are failing, and in a grant format and not a loan format. I can't imagine talking to somebody on the street and saying, yeah, we gave away $700,000, to businesses in a grant form, and half of them still failed anyway. I really want to focus on assisting those to get them through and to bridge the gap. And, I appreciate the business counseling and all of those things to really help people adapt through there. But I can't imagine a situation that I can fiscally responsibly support the proposal that you've put on the table.
And I guess one more other example too is that also why this brought forward and why I wanted to have this discussion is that I know there's other cities, and most recently just weeks ago, Beaverton issued grants to businesses, and so part of that is what businesses are looking at, saying, well, why are the other ones taking ARPA money and giving grants out, and why would we be doing loans to repay it? I understand what you're saying is that if a business is thinking, why help them with the grants? But it's just what I've heard. So, and then kind of from a business mindset that you know, there's a little bit of help where they know they don't have to pay it back compared to everything else they'll have to be paying back.
Isn't the proposal here to do both from, I mean, is it
yeah.
a staff recommendation to do both? So I guess Councilor Goodhouse, are you giving feedback that you think all of it or most of it should be in the form of grants and less of it in the form of loans, or that this wasn't proposed as an all or nothing here from the staff?
No, maybe I misunderstood it, but it sounded like Lloyd was saying, you know, there's going to be part, but if if we want to look at doing more for grants, and so that's why I was saying that I would, you know, maybe if I need to word it in a different way, is that I'd like to see more go for grants, or if the grants go quickly, then we take a look at it again and maybe assess giving more towards grants.
Okay, well, we can put that into the whole conversation. Council President Lube, did you want to say more? Sorry.
No, I mean, I wanted to respond that I think I understand that you're coming from a business mindset, but I mean, my day job is a financial director at a very successful company in Portland, and that's the mindset that I bring, is the fiscal responsibility of helping to run a pretty significant business. So I have a business mindset as well. It just may look different than yours.
All right, Councilor Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Lloyd. Appreciate that. When on the slide that's mobility trends, is that just to highlight that, I guess, the mobility trends, I'm not sure why that has relevance on this particular presentation, particularly if you're looking at grocery and pharmacy. It's a very short time window between December 25th through February 5th. And so I'm not sure what that has to do with this particular CARES Round 6 proposal. If you could help me understand that, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Good question. Well, I guess Mike can't probably get us back to there very quickly. I was able to track down from Google a document that shows mobility trends, and what that was showing us is that in places like retail and recreation services, as well as groceries and pharmacies, fewer actual people are going into the local place of business to do their shopping. Thanks, Mike, for getting us there. There you go. So this is the time frame that I had available to us from this document, as short as it is. It's showing us that even as we're coming out of the health pandemic, we're shopping locally less, and that might be a structural change in the economy where we're just not going to those local places of business as often as we used to. So it's showing us the trend is happening, and what I'm wondering from an economic perspective is this going to change, or might this be the new normal that we the structural thing where we just don't consume locally as much as we used to?
Yeah, that's why I was a bit concerned about this, because I know a lot of people are still getting it delivered. So if the mobility trends mean they're physically going into the grocery store, like I still don't, just because I'm of COVID concerns and Omicron concerns. So I get it delivered because thankfully that service is available from a number of different businesses, which actually helps businesses too, because you're still buying from them. So I was a little concerned just about that data. And then also Councilor President Lube had raised a point just about starting at the 100K point and then maybe going to 250, maybe the data wasn't necessarily there. So I'm not against this program. I'm just a little concerned that we don't have enough data to really substantiate what the perhaps starting amount should be and what the end amount should be. And any clarification you have on that would help. Thank you.
Yeah, the only clarification I have is that, as I mentioned, I've only had 2 businesses approach me asking for a grant type of assistance in the last couple of months. I'm not seeing that type of need like we saw in 2020, where hundreds of businesses were calling, emailing, trying every which way they could to get my attention, given the acuteness of that crisis. I don't think we're in the same time period. And the proposal is to do a need-based assessment so that as we take in applications, we have to be sure that there's a legitimate need, that it's COVID related. To Councilwoman Lube's question, we'd want to make sure that as best we can, if it was a grant, that they're going to be a going concern. But that is a challenge with grants, is we have a lot less surety about how that money gets spent. I'm drifting off from your point, Councilwoman Shaw, but I'm trying to cover a couple of things, admitting that we have imperfect information right now.
Well, and I guess I'll interject here before others for just a moment. And I'm thinking about, I spent one of the random things I did as a volunteer for probably 5 to 7 years while I was serving on the city's budget committee at the church that my wife and I were attending at the time. I was involved in basically the group that would come alongside either community members or members of the church who had financial problems of some sort, which happened all the time. I mean, this was like a constant thing in a large congregation. And I then ended up running, kind of like being the volunteer organizer of that group too, and that involved reviewing. I mean, it's interesting, the same types of things you'd look for that we're talking about here was the same kind of analysis we would do. Like if we provided $1,500 of assistance, now this is back in 2005, so that was a lot more money then, but if we provided $1,500 worth of assistance, would it actually solve the problem? Like, would it get them on the path that would then be sustainable? Or would it just prolong the problem another month? Because if it just prolonged the problem, then there's a fundamental cash flow problem in the household, or in this case, the question would be in the business. Like a grant might be appropriate, as Lloyd is describing, after an assessment, if that's the type of need. But this is tricky. And I would argue that a loan doesn't necessarily, I mean, a loan can be helpful for, many business needs and business reasons, and could be a very sustainable, there could be very good business rationale for that. Household situation's a little different when, you've got an inflow outflow problem that's not going to change. But I guess I just want to, like, when I've listened to this whole conversation, that's like the comparison I can draw, is that, you've really got to understand what the situation is and what financial constraints there are, and also what's driving that inflow outflow problem and how big it is, and whether it's a one-time thing or a sustained problem. I mean, those all go into sort of trying to make a good judgment and really help the business or the individual develop a plan. Okay, I've just said a lot. Sorry about that. Who is first? Councilor Goodhouse?
I guess to kind of clarify more what I was mentioning, I know that back when we were looking at the what to do with the ARPA funds and everything, I mentioned City Manager Reimer that, let's hold some back in case we hit another wave of kind of another virus strain or impact on businesses. And that's what I see this as, is that businesses, obviously they're looking for their bottom line, they plan for things, but through this last wave, there was a lot of people that talked about having some of the lowest sales they've had for a long time, or really having a deep, big impact on it, on their business, and still just that problem with the employment. So that's where I'm bringing it forward, just as far as talking about, that little bump just helping them out, because they took a big hit in this last 2 months. If it wasn't, a business hasn't closed, they did close, and they're still, I think they're starting to come out of that now. But there was definitely a huge wave this last 2 months of businesses. Like, you've seen left and right businesses closed for 5 days, lost sales, everything on that, on top of coming out of the pandemic anyway. So that's why I brought this up, where I think a little bump will help out some of these businesses, and that's all they kind of need. But if they're looking at something where it's a loan, they're like, okay, I don't know if I'll take that or not. That's why I was just throwing that out. So that's where I think, and I think it's still good, because I hopefully, we pray that we don't hit another one, but it's still good to keep some of this money reserved down the road if we have something that happens summertime where another strain comes out and really just hits businesses, or we do another closure. So that's why I'm looking at it. And it may be something where people didn't ask because they thought maybe all the money was gone and didn't realize there's more money. So maybe that's why people didn't ask, or maybe they're okay.
Council President Lube?
I'm curious, Lloyd, on your thoughts of if we would be able to open a grant application or loans and then come back to the table to see how much funding and the needs that are there? Like, what would that turnaround be if we were to say, you know, hey, at this point, we'd really like to see demonstrated of people who are applying and need it? Or is that just completely backwards? I'm having a really hard time with what feels like, and I know it's not a blank check, but when you say, you know, I'm asking for $100,000, but up to 350, it just feels completely disconnected from the actual need that's out there. And I just like some more data-informed decisions on what the true need is. Just, you know, and also we have $3 million left, and, you know, not that we haven't spent it on incredibly important things, but also trying to figure out, you know, what does the next year look like for us and for our community?
All good points. I only know the need that I've discovered in hearing from a couple businesses, in talking to economic development managers from other cities, even from Beaverton. I'm aware of their program. This is my best guesstimate at how to roll out a financial aid program to support businesses in the city.
So Lloyd, your professional recommendation, just so we're clear, your professional recommendation is $100,000 of grants, possibly up to another $250,000, and then $400,000 of a loan program, correct?
Yes.
And that loan, the $400,000 would leverage more money. It would serve as a loss reserve and allow MISO or some other organization to loan more money.
Right. Typically, that money is matched or leveraged, they call it. So that number would get larger, we would expect.
Councilor Newton. You're muted. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I put my hand down, but I forgot. I put my hand down, but I forgot to unmute. Sorry. Yeah, I've been listening to everyone, and I think the ability to have some money available for a grant is important. I think there might be businesses that just need a little bit of help. If we give a business $500 or whatever it is to pay their rent for a month, and they're not going to have rent for the next month, you know, I mean, that's not good for them. They're not going to make it. But I can't see us giving a business $100,000 and then they close the next week. I mean, we're going to be looking at specific needs. And I can see a business who just recovered and is retooling themselves and thinking, okay, I'm going to go from a 12-hour-a-day restaurant operation to a dinner-only restaurant operation, but I need a really great espresso maker because I'm retooling my business. So I need a loan. So, I mean, I can see it working in both cases. And so I support the staff's recommendation. I do think we ought to say that $100,000 and then the extra $250 if needed. I would think that City Manager Reimer could let us know that real time, so that if we want to see some data or information, we can say, okay, you're gonna authorize this additional funding. Give us some information so we know that, you know, we're comfortable with that. But I think it's important. I think that's what the ARPA funds are for. They're for our community, our businesses, our residents to survive this COVID. And I think that the CARES programs have worked pretty well so far. I'm hoping that every time we do the program, we streamline the application, you know, because that can be overwhelming for a business owner when they're stressed as it is. So I support the recommendation, and I trust that, you know, we'll be able to help some businesses and those that are, you know, not able to survive after a month. You know, my heart goes out to them, but I don't know that a 1 month grant is going to help. So anyway, those are my comments.
All right, so I hear Councilor Newton's just made a proposal, essentially that we follow the staff recommendation. And that includes both grants and loans at the amounts that were described. I've heard Council President Liu be a little uncomfortable with the grants. I've heard Councilor Goodhouse want more grants. I don't know that that's going to get resolved here. I will also say that I might suggest that a compromise position might be to authorize the $100,000 in grants and say that if we're going to authorize another $250,000 in grants, we need data to come back to a council meeting and briefly, even if it's only 15 or 20-minute discussion, see the data, understand the need that at that point, Mr. Purdy would be able to articulate and then allocate further. That may be a fiscally responsible way to provide adequate oversight and decision-making on the grant side of things. So just something to consider. Council President Lube?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify my position. I'm not uncomfortable with grants. I think they're an incredible tool and have helped out our community. I'm uncomfortable with that squishy sort of like start at 100,000 and go up to, or do all of it in grants. I think they're incredibly important, but I appreciate your proposal and would be in support of additional funding if the demonstrated need is there. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're all collectively working on a narrowing of a proposal here. So let me try to restate it and then we'll let Councilor Goodhouse speak. So a revised proposal, Councilor Newton, I'm hoping you could support this, would be we're approving 100,000 in grants now, 400,000 in loan reserve, and then the option to come back for another 250,000 in grants. If there's data and information that supports it, it comes back to council for brief discussion and action. That's where I feel this is headed potentially, if everybody can live with that. Councilor Goodhouse, you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with this. That's exactly kind of what I was implying, was that, you know, if it goes past that, then we take a look and see if there's a need and come back with a quick, you know, description. Maybe we won't use that, but if there's a mass influx on it, then come back and say, this is what we see it being used for. And, you know, here's why we maybe suggest there's more, because this is what we're hearing from businesses. And it's a great way to touch base to see what is going on with the business community. Maybe you're hearing, but once you open that up, and I think it'd be great to mix in there just, you know, data capturing, make sure we have the best way to capture these businesses. I think we've done before, but get all forms that we can from when these people are applying for this.
We've learned that through the previous rounds to try to streamline the application process, but collect the information at one time in the beginning. Yes, sir.
All right, City Manager Reimer, I thought I saw you pipe on a bit ago. I don't know if you feel like you need to add anything. I want to give you that opportunity.
Nope, nothing more at this point. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. So can everybody support the direction that that I proposed?
Yeah, I think that's fine as long as it doesn't hold people up for 2 or 3 weeks. You know what I mean? So we need to keep moving on it.
Given that Lloyd's only identified 2 businesses that even need help, you know, it's hard for me to imagine it's going to be that kind of crisis. But Lloyd, to that point, if it becomes a massive crisis, we expect you to get in front of us quickly, even if it means an emergency meeting. So
right. Yeah.
Work with the city manager if that becomes an issue. Okay, I see thumbs ups. Councilor Shaw, you good? Youth Councilor Nog, anything to add? Thumb up. Okay. Lloyd, do you have the direction you need?
Yes, Mayor, I do.
Okay. All right. Were we supposed to actually vote on that?
City Manager Reimer. That'd be preferred, Mayor, to appropriate the funds or allocate the funds.
Okay. Who wants to make a motion?
I can do it. I move to authorize the creation of Tigard Cares Round 6 to support local firms impacted by COVID and the resulting labor market constraints by allocating $400,000 to the loan program and $100,000 to the grant program, with the ability to come back to council for another $250,000 in grants.
I can second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, roll call vote, starting with Youth Councilor Nog for an advisory vote, please. Actually, we're allocating money, right? Now I'm correcting the meeting guide here. We should not be asking, I guess I want to ask the city manager, because I've said I'm not going to get in the middle of this. So City Manager Reimer, should Youth Councilor Nog provide an advisory vote on this or not?
Yes, on this item, we think it's appropriate.
Okay, so City Recorder, start with Youth Councilor Nog, please.
Youth Councilor Nog,
Yes.
Councilor Newton,
Yes.
Council President Lube,
Yes.
Councilor Shaw,
Yes.
Mayor Snyder,
Yes.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Okay, motion's adopted unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Council. And Mr. Purdy, thank you for spending so much time with us. We appreciate it and work through some important things. As I indicated, we're going to reschedule item number 8 to a future meeting. Mr. Nolup, I'm sorry about that. I'm looking forward to the presentation, but it's not going to happen tonight. Let's see, we had no other non-agenda items. City Manager Reimer, administrative report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for a great meeting, and we'll get the Tyler item rescheduled for you. Just a couple things since we're running late on time. It is National Engineers Week, so kudos and thanks to all of our engineers on our team and those that serve our community in many different ways for bringing forward all the infrastructure projects that our community enjoys, and many of them that obviously you talked about through the budget process as well as approving the contract. So happy National Engineers Week to our teammates. Since we've talked about library and data as a theme tonight, we want to follow up on some additional data about library cards. This has become a theme of our meetings here. So far, 10% of the students who have received their new cards have already used their accounts. So we do know that. And they have checked out 167 of them have used their cards and checked out 534 items. On the teen winter reading that we talked about, the participants have already read over 3,376 pages. And they have till next Monday to complete that. So we'll let you know exactly how many pages we end up at. On Cook Park, one of the inclusive playground projects that our engineers are working on as well. We had 361 respondents reviewed our proposals and provided feedback. So that's great feedback. We've been getting other feedback internally as well from teammates. And so we'll take all that into the final design. And then just one last thing, obviously downtown was a big discussion point tonight as well. Our Downtown Reimagine project is going to kick off here in March. The IGA has been signed. And so just a reminder, this is going to give us a chance to really look at the downtown, how we are developing our transportation, how equity is part of it. And so we'll look at transit-oriented design, the quality of walking, cycling, transit choices, just a variety of things. So as we continue to talk about our downtown and all the things you're talking about today, the Tiger Maid program, this is just one more effort of making sure what we're doing will serve our community the best moving forward. So that concludes my brief remarks, and thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, City Manager Reimer. Tigard City Council is now going to go into executive session to discuss labor negotiations under ORS 192.660 subsection 2E. No executive session may be held for the purposes of taking any final action or making any final decision. Executive sessions are closed to the public. The council will adjourn immediately after the executive session. And with that, we are recessed. Good night, Tigard.